Norse mythology tells the story of Jörmungandr, a great serpent so long that it wraps itself the entire way around Midgard and bites its own tail. Legend says that when Jörmungandr unclasps its jaws and starts to unfurl, it will signal the beginning of Ragnarok, the destruction of the world. And that was about as much information as the Foundation gave to Agent Nielsen when they assigned him to his watch duty in Greenland. In the frozen tundra all day, every day, he had been equipped with a sniper rifle, thermal goggles, and put up high in a watchtower. If he saw anyone, he had to shoot on sight, no questions asked. Whether it was his squad mates, the brigadier general, or even his own mother, if anyone walked across the barren stretch of ice ahead of him, he was to shoot them dead. Under no circumstances was anyone allowed to enter that cave. The fate of the world could depend on it. But it was cold, and the days were long. For months he'd been sitting there by himself without seeing a single soul walk across the glacier. That's why it took him so long to spy the figure stumbling across the ice half a kilometer away. But the person didn't look any clearer when Agent Nielsen took a look through his thermal binoculars. Barely registering as much warmer than the snow around him, the man stumbled forward, seemingly unaware of the world around him. Could this be the start of the swan song of the world? Is this what he had been warned about? Without a moment's hesitation, Agent Nielsen snatched up the sniper rifle and readied his sights on the man. Somewhere buried deep beneath the Greenland ice is one of the most dangerous SCPs that the Foundation has ever come across. To say that SCP-722's reawakening could spell the destruction of human civilization is no idle concern. Classified as a Keter-level SCP, SCP-722 has been nicknamed Jörmungandr after the Norse myth. Researchers speculate that the creature's existence could in some way be linked to the early origins of the story of the Norse creature. 722 was brought to the Foundation's attention relatively recently. Environmental activist group Greenpeace was shooting a documentary on the effects of global warming on glaciers in Greenland. A small crew, including a director, producer, 3 camera operators, and a sound recordist, headed out to get some close-up footage from amongst the glaciers. Walking from ice sheet to ice sheet, they noticed several rounded entrances to what looked like deep ice caves. Surmising that these openings were only accessible to them because of the melting glacier ice, the crew climbed down into the caves to get some never-before-seen footage. Some of the footage of their exploration has been recovered since, and in the background of several shots as they are adjusting exposure and pulling focus, you can hear the producer and director theorizing about where these caves have come from. They initially seem to think that the caves are millennia old, preserved by sub-zero temperatures, but soon they come across several markings on the walls, ancient hieroglyphs and symbols. None of the crew were language experts, and so in the footage you can hear them struggling to identify which people group would have carved those into the ice walls. In the decades since, language experts from around the world have studied these markings on those walls, and have still been unable to identify any discernible links to any known human script. Most agree that it does seem to predate the settlement of the island by Eric the Red at the start of the 11th century. During this period, it is believed that there were no human settlements on the island, so the origins of this script remain unknown. As the footage goes on, you may start to notice something that the Greenpeace crew does not. One of the ice walls is no longer a wall at all. It looks like a rock in some of the footage, but whenever a flashlight shines on its surface, you can see a pattern to it. Scales. Then an opening at the far side of the tunnel. The crew emerges into an enormous cavern, estimated to be upwards of 200 meters in height and several times wider. Even their powerful flashlights struggle to cut through the darkness inside. That's the point that the sound recordist notices the scales running alongside them. As the camera pans, you see that they have been walking alongside a tail, several times taller than them. A tail that snakes its way through the darkness of the cavern to meet a hulking mass at the other side, shrouded in darkness. That is where the footage cuts off. Those Greenpeace filmmakers were next seen in a local town that evening. None of them had the chance to extol the wonders of what they'd encountered that day, as they were all sick. A couple went straight to bed in their lodgings complaining of intense headaches and exhaustion. Others tried to check themselves into the ER, but never made it. Each of the crew died of different causes: necrosis of the skin, internal bleeding, kidney failure. By 9 p.m. that day, all of them were dead. Fortunately, there just so happened to be a low-level Foundation agent staying in the same guest house as them who heard the commotion. Within 2 days, a perimeter was established. Within 2 years, the Foundation gained the bulk of knowledge of this SCP that they rely on to this day. It is unknown exactly how large SCP-722 actually is. A hulking serpent, half buried in ice, much of its body cannot be observed. It sleeps coiled up in the middle of the cavern that the filmmakers happened across. Some of its body is buried beneath fallen-in parts of the caves, others frozen into the ground around it. However, based on what can be observed of this SCP, it is estimated to be in the ranges of 8 to 12 kilometers from head to tail. Fortunately for just about everyone, including you, this SCP appears to be dormant. At no time since its discovery has this SCP been observed to move, make a sound, or otherwise indicate consciousness. Sensors are installed in the chamber to monitor its life functions and study its heart rate, temperature, brain activity, and more. One concern to the Foundation is that since its discovery, 722 has had a 0.9% uptick in neural activity. Researchers hope that this is just a natural part of the sleep cycle and that it will return to a deeper slumber soon. That is the hope, at least. So what makes this SCP so dangerous then if it's sound asleep? Well, let's go back to Agent Nielsen staring through the scope of his rifle. The barrel kicked back, a puff of warm smoke there and gone in cold air. He watched just long enough to confirm the kill before radioing back to command what he had observed. Within an hour, the cleanup crew arrived. Riding on snowmobiles, they waited at a distance for an hour before approaching the body. Rather unceremoniously, they wrapped it up in a black plastic bag, strapped it to the back of their snowmobile, and took it away for cremation. Nielsen just sat there in his watchtower the whole time, observing it all. The person looked sick, and not the kind of sick that you'd get from spending too much time out there on the ice. Their skin had gone rotten, like they had gangrene or leprosy. It wasn't just your usual frostbite. Most concerning, they'd been wearing a jumpsuit, standard issue for D-Class personnel. Only a vial held in their cold, dead fingers was any kind of clue for Nielsen as to what had been going on in that cave. But that was as close as the agent ever came to understanding the mysteries of SCP-722. The vial, however, was in many ways all he needed to know. That is because contained in that vial was a sample of the liquid secreted by 722. It is a liquid that the Greenpeace crew came into close contact with when they found the creature, and it's a liquid that promises and denies great power and great risk to the Foundation. Any and all attempts to study this liquid in any meaningful sense have failed. Anyone who comes into contact with it will immediately suffer acute sickness. Interestingly, however, there seems to be little consistency as to how this sickness manifests itself. Some develop a number of cancerous cells, whilst others lose cognitive function due to brain swelling. Symptoms seem to vary from person to person. Naturally, this makes studying the substance very difficult. Hazardous material suits have been deployed for researchers attempting to study it, but have all failed, despite being otherwise effective against chemical, biological, and radioactive threats. How the substance is able to infect them is unknown. Sadly, a good number of scientists had to die to make this discovery. Another route of study is to take the substance out of the cave and observe it under laboratory conditions. This was what Agent Nielsen observed as he shot and killed the D-Class personnel emerging from the cave. The D-Class had been sent in to retrieve the vial of the substance for external study. While a safe and direct route of entry and exit had been planned for the man to take, he became critically ill whilst in contact with 722 and developed an aggressive fever. No longer coherent over the radio, he dropped out of signal, wandering through the tunnels for 2 hours until emerging out of an exit high up on the glacier. 2 agents with higher security clearance were dispatched to deal with the body. The reason for their wait was for their own safety. 722's toxin appears to denature with time away from its source, causing it to weaken in potency. If they had approached immediately, they may have well suffered similar fates to the D-Class. They survived, but the sample was ruined. All subsequent attempts have also been met with failure. It seems almost impossible to capture a clean sample and transport it any kind of distance. With this toxin, the Foundation would have possession of an immense biological weapon, akin to the discovery of the atom bomb. But as of right now, all it's good for is killing D-Class personnel. Initially, the Foundation believed the fluid to be a defense mechanism for the SCP, something to protect it in its deep sleep. But the more time is spent observing it, the more time this perception is shifting. SCP-722's toxin appears instead to be a weapon. As such, the containment of this creature is of paramount importance. There are 8 known access points into the tunnel network that would grant access to SCP-722. Each of them has been sealed with reinforced gates with additional layers of soundproofing. At regular 4-hour intervals, nitrogen gas cooled to a near-liquid state is to be pumped through these doors without fail. It is believed that the creature is a form of proto-reptile, and so is theoretically cold-blooded. Its internal temperature is dictated by its surroundings. Therefore, by keeping a cool average temperature in these caves, it is thought that this SCP's slumber can be prolonged. How long is unclear. With rising global temperatures year after year, the threat that the Greenpeace activists were proclaiming is very real, just perhaps not quite in the way they'd envisioned. Not only would there be an increase in natural disasters and a decrease in biodiversity, there would also be a 12-kilometer snake roaming around the planet, killing anyone in its path. Not ideal. As such, the Foundation has also planted a number of highly skilled individuals in prominent environmental positions in the hopes of turning the tide of global warming sooner. Should the ice in that cave system warm by even a couple of degrees, who knows what kind of spike they might see on the neural monitors. This SCP naturally is buried deep beneath layers and layers of security clearances too. Only in exceptional circumstances and for vital maintenance is anyone allowed to approach this SCP. A minimum of 2 Level 3 clearance agents are required to sign off on any such works. In recent years, a new Brigadier General took charge of the containment operations of SCP-722 after his predecessor was stripped of his duties. Overly zealous experiments and increasingly desperate attempts to harvest or synthesize the 722 toxin saw an alarming uptick in neural activity. Over 40 D-Class personnel were processed and disposed of within a 2-week period in an attempt to assemble a micro-laboratory within the main chamber itself. This project failed, and the noises of construction threatened the peace that had so long been maintained beneath the glacier. The new Brigadier General is taking no such risks, enforcing a zero-tolerance policy on anyone approaching Site-103 unless suitably cleared. A number of hikers have sadly had to be killed this way, but the Foundation believes it to be a necessary sacrifice to keep the peace. It is quite easy to find a convincing backstory for their untimely deaths and the lack of bodies to bury. Just another person to get lost and fall down a crack in the glacier, warning stories that are shared and planted in local towns and on the internet. The only threat to this current peace is a new avenue of inquiry that researchers have stumbled across, a link to a group of animals found halfway around the world. Monitor lizards of the genus Varanus seem to share a similar set of traits to SCP-722, namely the nature of their toxins. You may be familiar with the bite of a Komodo dragon. While the initial wound sure does hurt, the real damage comes in the following hours and days as necrosis sets in from the toxins in its mouth. Could these creatures share a common ancestor? Could 722 be the common ancestor? As of right now, it is just a hunch, but it's one that has taken root amongst the research staff. In order to find out more, though, they need samples, tissue samples, taken straight from the SCP itself. The only way to do back is to go back into the caves and start cutting. If a bit of construction noise was enough to raise brain activity by 0.9%, taking a hunk of flesh could prove a whole lot more dangerous, not least for the personnel involved, who will all have to sacrifice their lives. The potential benefits could be huge. A way to study fatal diseases in a new light, perhaps finding a way to reverse engineer cures to some of the deadliest conditions on the planet, or perhaps the missing ingredient to synthesizing the most powerful biological weapon in human history. Maybe worst of all, it could all trigger the reawakening. Do you remember how the story of Jörmungandr ends? With a prediction that when the great serpent uncoils, the end of the world, Ragnarok itself, will arrive. But that's just an old fairy tale, right? Who doesn't love dogs? They're friendly, energetic, and can be beneficial to their owner's happiness and mental health. On top of all those positive qualities, most dogs are fiercely loyal to their masters. You'll often hear stories of dogs defending their owners or even staying by their side through their very last days, and even sticking next to them beyond death. As sad as that thought might be to many dog owners, it provides us the perfect context for today's topic. It's about time you met SCP-1111. Sometimes also known by the nickname the White Dog. This moniker actually refers to one of the two halves of SCP-1111, namely the former, SCP-1111-1, while its counterpart is simply known only as SCP-1111-2. As you may have already deduced, SCP-1111-1 is, or at least appears to be, a fairly common domesticated dog. Sporting white fur that gives it its nickname, the White Dog is a cross between two different popular breeds, the German Shepherd and the Labrador Retriever. However, upon closer inspection, this particular pup is a far cry from one you might see fetching sticks or chasing squirrels at the park. For one, this dog never eats or drinks. Under normal circumstances, that would be worrying behavior in any dog. But in SCP-1111-1's case, it comes second to the fact that this dog is partially see-through. Now that's definitely not normal. In actual fact, this pooch is pretty far from ordinary. It seems to be at least semi-translucent, not quite as much as we usually picture a ghost or hologram, but also not fully visible like a living being. In fact, how clearly visible the White Dog is can vary depending on how close it is to 1111-2. Any further than 500 meters away and the dog will gradually grow more and more transparent, but not fully invisible. But visibility isn't the only thing that shifts with 1111-1's distance from its other half. The size of the dog also changes. It remains standing at 150 centimeters when directly beneath 1111-2. and gradually gets smaller the further and further away from 1111-2 it gets. Finally, there's its eyes. SCP-1111-1 possesses a distinct pair of glowing red eyes, the brightness and intensity of which increase the closer it is to 1111-2. So let's recap. So far, we have a strange white dog with glowing eyes that changes size and becomes more or less visible the further it gets from a secondary element. But if the white dog is SCP-1111-1, then what forms this second part of SCP-1111? Well, if you were to look close enough at the white dog, you'd notice the red collar that it wears around its neck. And hanging from that collar is a tag, on which is printed one single word: loyal. It's certainly a fitting word to describe 1111-1. Why? Because SCP-1111-2 is presumably the dog's master, or rather, its master's dead body. Dressed in an old, worn business suit and formal dress shoes, SCP-1111-2 appears to be a deceased male of indeterminate age. The precise identity of this man has proven next to impossible for Foundation researchers to determine. The condition of his suit and shoes have deteriorated so much that it has been difficult to even identify the original company that produced the clothing worn by the corpse. As for his cause of death, well, that unfortunately seems all too obvious, given that the 1111-2 body always appears the same way, hanging from a tree with a noose around his neck. Foundation staff observed the two parts that make up SCP-1111 have noted that 1111-2 will occasionally make quick, violent twitching movements. These random jerks and spasms of the corpse are consistent with those exhibited by a person who is dying from asphyxiation, and often researchers have heard the body making desperate gasps for air. The closer his white furried canine counterpart is, the more frequent and violent these motions and sounds will become. It's almost as if SCP-1111-2 has somehow been trapped on the very brink of death, reliving those final moments over and over again, all while guarded by his loyal white dog. If left alone and not interfered with, the white dog will lie down just beneath where its master's body is hanging. The dog never sleeps, nor does it require any food or water, and does not even seem to breathe. And as long as Foundation research staff keep their distance, both parts of SCP-1111 seem content to remain in a docile state. To keep them contained, the SCP Foundation has established a 2-kilometer safe zone around SCP-1111, keeping them monitored through cameras attached to weather balloons. The restricted enclosure is, according to a public cover story, a weather monitoring station, hence the balloons. No member of Foundation staff is permitted anywhere within a kilometer of SCP-1111, unless they are given express permission from a superior member of the Foundation. Should SCP-1111-1 ever stray away from the tree where its master hangs though, then the area must be evacuated of all personnel until the dog returns to its normal position. However, Foundation staff are urged to be wary when approaching SCP-1111, because the white dog may well be more ferociously loyal than any pet. Emphasis on ferocious. The moment that 1111-1 becomes aware of anything coming towards itself and its owner's body, the dog will become viciously hostile. Regardless of the person or object coming towards it, the semi-corporeal canine will attempt to attack and destroy the intruder. In this state, the white dog exhibits even more dramatic physiological differences from a normal domesticated dog. Video footage recorded by the SCP Foundation shows that the dog is capable of reaching incredible speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour, which is, of course, considerably faster than an average canine. The white dog can also reach a height of 6 meters when jumping up into the air, and has teeth and a bite strength powerful enough to tear through armor plating composed of 15mm thick titanium. Given the entity's speed, aggression, and translucent qualities, any attempts by the SCP Foundation to neutralize the white dog or even capture it for closer examination have ended the same grisly way for the staff members who tried. The creature's fierce loyalty defending its owner's body also make it incredibly difficult for Foundation staff to even get close enough to SCP-1111-2 to properly study the remains. As we said before, that loyal tag around the dog's neck is certainly an accurate description. On a date which has been redacted from its file, an incident occurred involving SCP-1111 and a team that consisted of a number of Foundation agents. This team had been ordered to neutralize the white dog and transport the anomalous animal to a containment facility. Attempting to evade the creature's direct line of sight, the agents approached the hanging body of SCP-1111-2 from the north, the opposite direction to the way the dog was facing. Possessing a sense of hearing and smell far beyond that of a human being, the white dog was able to quickly detect the agents approaching its master. When the team got within 300 meters of the tree where the body was hanging, the canine set upon them, tearing at clothing and shredding protective armor with its teeth in order to get to the agent's soft flesh underneath. One of these agents fled, running as fast as they could from the area. But of course, this was a futile move, as the white dog quickly noticed and began to pursue the Foundation agent with its superpowered speed. As it chased them, the surveillance cameras recorded SCP-1111-1 decreasing in size, becoming harder to see with the naked eye the further it ran from the tree. The dog's speed began to decline too. The further the dog got from the tree with the noose, the less the body hanging from it seemed to be spasming too. When the white dog had reached 900 meters from SCP-1111-2, the corpse was seen to stop moving entirely, frozen and stiff as one would normally expect a deceased body to be. Realizing how far away it was from its master, SCP-1111-1 froze. Appearing unsure for a moment, it turned to look towards the body of its master, perhaps sensing that the random jerks and post-mortem movements had stopped. At this point, the dog howled and sprinted back towards the tree, causing the corpse of its owner to begin twitching yet again. Footage of this incident showed that the white dog was impervious to conventional weapons, and any rounds fired at the canine by Foundation agents merely passed through its ghostly body. However, its claws and teeth were very much solid, and it was able to slaughter almost all the agents, save for the one who fled, who ended up being the sole survivor of the encounter. Following this disastrous mission, the O5 Council issued an order that, in order to protect the lives of Foundation personnel, only remote-controlled drones and expendable D-Class personnel would be permitted anywhere near SCP-1111. Shortly after the previous incident, a group of D-Class were sent into the area around the tree where SCP-1111-2 was hanging, this time approaching from multiple directions at once. But this only led to the same results, as the white dog began to quickly move between each of the D-Classes, killing them one after another. Only one, D-83011, was able to make it close enough to the corpse to make any noteworthy observations. As they approached, the hanging corpse of SCP-1111-2 seemed to slow its jerks and twitches, and the body did something that had never been seen before. It opened its eyes. It raised its arms towards the approaching D-Class in what looked like a welcoming hug, only for D-83011 to be torn to shreds by the white dog moments after. Cameras nearby picked up more previously unseen movement, namely the owner's mouth moving almost as if he was saying the words, "No, down boy." But soon after, the corpse fell limp again and resumed its normal twitches. Following this, the Foundation have theorized that the white dog could possibly be contained by somehow removing its master's body from the area. Some staff have also noted that SCP-1111 shares certain traits with SCP-023, a similar anomalous creature also referred to as the Black Shuck. Much like the white dog, the Shuck also possesses a ghostly canine form, and appears to be the same large dog-like creature that is referenced in ancient folklore from throughout the British Isles. According to legend, the Shuck appears to travelers at crossroads, serving as an omen of bad luck, impending disaster, and is even thought to be one of the Hounds of Hell itself. SCP-023, like SCP-1111, also has anomalous abilities that focus on geographic space. In the Black Shuck's case, anyone it detects approaching it will die or lose a member of their family within a year. Researchers working for the Foundation believe that SCP-023 and SCP-1111-1 could be related, or even instances of the same phenomenon, a sort of dog yin and yang. But since they have still, as of yet, been unable to capture the white dog, it has been impossible to verify this. The SCP Foundation will no doubt keep trying though. While testing may have been suspended for the time being, they always know where to find SCP-1111-1, beneath its master's hanging body, guarding it for all eternity. On the 13th of October 1989, the town of Danner, Wisconsin was shaken by a seismic event unlike anything they'd ever experienced. This might have been written off as an earthquake, were it not for one disturbing factor. The ground-shaking event was accompanied by a huge spike of radioactivity, with the strange phenomenon happening a month before the Berlin Wall was torn down, during a period of the Cold War that historians call the Year of Crisis. It's easy to understand why the people of Danner immediately assumed the worst, but the huge eruption they felt wasn't the result of a nuclear bomb going off. The SCP Foundation was alerted to the event in Danner when they picked up a series of radio transmissions coming from just outside the town. When they arrived, they found something incredible, like something out of a sci-fi movie. Standing at the quake's epicenter was a creature that looked to be from another world. Standing 2 meters tall and weighing almost 300 kilograms, the being was green and brown in color with a bulky humanoid body. Its head was a different story though, and resembled a gigantic housefly with a proboscis and huge stereoscopic eyes. Surprisingly, the strange creature did not immediately go on a rampage. Instead, the being, designated SCP-2273, appeared to be exhausted, injured, and extremely malnourished. It offered no resistance at all to the Foundation containment team, and it was taken to Site-17 without conflict. While the SCP Foundation is no stranger to visitors from other worlds, there was something especially unusual about this supposed alien invader. The doctors who examined the creature and treated its injuries found an appendage that seemed to function as an organic radio transmitter, and large open wounds on its shoulder blades and forearms where further appendages had been ripped off. Additionally, while its insect-like exoskeleton was mostly a uniform green and brown pattern, the creature's upper arms and torso were dotted with a variety of scars and markings that, on closer inspection, looked like military badges. Was this some kind of wounded intergalactic soldier who had been stranded on Earth? If it was, then how were the organic badges on this alien's exoskeleton a near-perfect match to military badges worn by soldiers in the Soviet Union? Even if they did reference a unit that didn't officially exist within the Soviet Army, the scientists were sure this alien wasn't an alien at all. Underneath its exoskeleton was a non-anomalous human being. If that was true, then this was even more terrifying than an extraterrestrial visitor. The scientists were sure that the USSR had developed a new kind of organic armor, and this anomaly showing up in Wisconsin was the result of a test on US soil that had gone wrong. If that was the case, then there was no telling how many more of these exoskeletons were out there and would need to be contained. The Foundation had to act quickly and find out more. While SCP-2273 was recovering, they called in Dr. Friedrich, an on-site psychologist who could speak several languages including Russian. Dr. Friedrich would be tasked with interrogating the SCP on his origins and the nature of the suit. The interview was conducted via AM radio from a separate observation chamber, as the biological transmitter seemed to be SCP-2273's only method of communication. The interview began with Dr. Friedrich speaking to SCP-2273 in Russian, only for 2273 to respond that Dr. Friedrich's accent was atrocious and requesting he use German instead. SCP-2273, who, according to the organic military patches on his body, was named Major Alexei Belitrov, initially resisted being interviewed. He believed that he was a prisoner of war, being held by the American military. According to him, he had been in the middle of battle, and that the Americans had killed his men and left him for dead in the wilderness. Nothing that Dr. Friedrich told him, that there was no war or that the Foundation was not affiliated with the US government, could convince him otherwise, and he refused to talk further. Before a second interview was conducted, Belitrov was given an old copy of the Level 1 Researcher General Debrief as a way of helping him further understand the nature of the Foundation and his containment. Belitrov was more cooperative after that, though the realization that he would most likely be kept in containment for the rest of his life caused him great distress, and he was unwilling to speak to Dr. Friedrich for another 3 days. Dr. Friedrich didn't give up though, and when Belitrov finally opened up to the doctor, he began to tell him more and more. Belitrov told the doctor that when he was a child, Russia was hit by an American nuclear warhead, and that the Soviet Union immediately retaliated. The resulting nuclear conflict, which Belitrov called the War to End the World, caused massive devastation and left most of the planet dangerously irradiated. That is why he had the exoskeleton. It was to shield him from the radiation and allow him to survive above ground. Unfortunately, Belitrov knew very little about how the suit was made or how it worked, saying that it was built by the engineers and that it grew naturally over a period of several years. But Belitrov hadn't made the decision himself. It was his parents who had volunteered him as a test subject for the exoskeleton suit program when he was still young, hoping it would give him a better chance at survival. The process of bonding the exoskeleton to the human body was extremely painful, but according to Belitrov, its advantages far outweighed the pain. The suit not only helped him survive in a nuclear wasteland, but made him a better soldier. The suit allowed him to lift and carry up to 1,200 kilograms, gave him stereoscopic vision, and the organic radio transmitter allowed him to communicate with other soldiers across long distances, as well as listen in on encrypted enemy transmissions. The wounds on his shoulders and arms, where it looked like appendages had been ripped out, were where his weapons and supply packs had previously been mounted. Belitrov had been stationed with his men in the area he was discovered when they were attacked by American soldiers. The soldiers had ripped off Belitrov's weapons and supply pack, and did the same to all his men as well. They were all shot, with Belitrov being spared for the moment only because the Americans had identified him as the commanding officer. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light, and the American soldiers vanished. Not only that, but the landscape changed. Where there had been a post-nuclear wasteland before, now there were lush green trees. Injured and disoriented, Belitrov began sending distress signals, only to have those signals intercepted by the SCP Foundation. The most interesting part of Belitrov's story, as far as the Foundation was concerned, came during his 4th interview, when Dr. Friedrich asked him about the engineers who had designed the exoskeleton suit. In Belitrov's own words, "They weren't truly known to man until the years of the Great War and the Revolution. The French found them in buried cities where the Western Allies were digging their trenches. Eventually, they were made to build weapons for the war by both sides." By his description, these engineers didn't sound human, but they were by no means unknown to the SCP Foundation. Belitrov described the engineers as humanoid, nocturnal, covered in fur, and possessing technology and intelligence far beyond that of any human. Those familiar with the Foundation's history might already know the engineers by their Foundation designation of SCP-1000, or their more commonly known name, Bigfoot. A quick rundown. SCP-1000 are a species of intelligent humanoid primates that lived alongside humanity in highly advanced cities until their own technology was turned against them. Not only were their cities wiped off the face of the earth, but 70% of their population was slaughtered, and the survivors were driven mad to the point that their mental faculties were no higher than those of a chimpanzee or gorilla. The SCP Foundation is tasked with keeping them away from human contact, in fear of what the creatures would be able to do to humanity if they ever regained their memories and full mental function, and rumors have been spread about them possessing deadly anomalous properties. But evidently, the destruction of the SCP-1000 species never occurred in Belitrov's universe, or if it did, it wasn't nearly as complete. In that timeline, humanity regained contact with SCP-1000 after discovering their underground cities sometime during World War I. After this discovery, both Allied and Axis powers began recruiting them to build weapons, and their weapons played a role in both the Russian Revolution and the Second World War. It was because of these technological advantages that the Cold War escalated into what would become the war to end all wars. Both sides were armed with not only nuclear warheads, but highly advanced radiation-proof exoskeleton armor that allowed the conflict to continue even after the total destruction of the planet. While the humans fought above ground, life continued as normal for SCP-1000 in their underground cities. As Belitrov noted, they never wore the armor themselves, as they had no need to venture above ground. Only soldiers wear armor, and this is not their war. Belitrov continued to adjust to life in containment and sitting for regular interviews with Dr. Friedrich. He was given the rations provided for humanoid anomalies, but in much larger quantities, as the suit required him to eat around 8,000 calories a day to keep it functioning. Belitrov also began taking advantage of his ability to access the Foundation's library. He would often read or listen to classical music, particularly by the Russian composer Tchaikovsky. He seemed especially fond of reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. No surprise, given he was able to directly relate to the experience of living through an apocalypse and being transported to a strange timeline with no way to return home. But with little else to occupy his time, Belitrov began to display symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, reporting in his now regular interviews with Dr. Friedrich that he was constantly reliving memories of the battles he'd fought and the lives he had taken in combat. The suit was making the problems worse too, it seemed. It was as if he could never forget, as one of its features was an ability to store and replay memories. This feature was intended as a strategic aid that would allow commanding officers to more effectively gather and process information about their surroundings. But outside of combat, this only served to force Belitrov into reliving his most painful memories again and again. Every night as he tried to sleep, he would see the faces of his men, their weapons torn from their exoskeletons, laying in the dirt after being gunned down by the enemy. Like many veterans, Belitrov was being hit all at once with the harsh realities of war. Now that his brain wasn't solely focused on keeping him alive, it had time to process all the horrors he'd experienced. He told Dr. Friedrich, "I trained alongside these men for years before they put us back on the surface. Since we were all young children, we were brothers, and I gave them the order to surrender and got them killed. I should have died with them." While the story of SCP-2273 ends here, the story of Alexei Belitrov, SCP-2273-1 continues. In 2018, Belitrov was allowed passage to Volgograd, Russia, as part of an anomaly reintegration program. While he was unable to secure employment within the Russian government as he had hoped, he eventually was taken in by a monastery and continued to write letters to Dr. Friedrich until Friedrich's eventual death from lymphoma-related complications. There's plenty more on the monastery, the anomaly reintegration program, and what happened to Major Belitrov when he returned to Russia, but that will have to be a story for another day. Calvin Lucien leads the Kill Squad team through the mud and freezing rain. In front of them looms the fortress of Baron Lehman Hoadley, the 8th Overseer. The team has already been through a lot, from breaking the Overseer Council's deal with death by eliminating O5-13, to using the Spear of the Non-Believer to kill the godlike Archivist, O5-10. The hunting of Overseers has taken a toll on the Kill Squad. O5-12 almost killed Adam, and Olivia was stuck in what seemed like an endless mind game with O5-11. The first 5 Overseers were eliminated, but but the words that the 9th Overseer spoke to Calvin Lucien before she died still run through his mind. Are you afraid of death? Now the kill squad is about to infiltrate one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the world to eliminate the 8th Overseer. Upon reaching the castle, the team is surprised to find the structure is in ruin. No one is supposed to know the location of 05-8 though. The fortress was supposed to be practically impregnable. They storm the castle of 05-8 all the same. The journal Calvin possesses that contains information about the members of the SCP Foundation's powerful 05 Council identifies him as a former industrialist named Baron Lehman Hoadley. With his vast wealth, Hoadley funded the Foundation at the start and was considered the unofficial leader of the council in its early days, with immense control over the actions of the organization. The kill squad makes their way through the dimly lit hallways of the castle. As they turn the corner, they are surprised to find the charred remains of Baron Lehman Hoadley's bodyguards. It seems that someone or something has gotten to Hoadley before they could. The team makes their way to the main chamber and breaches the door. Laying by a still-lit fireplace is 05-8. The kill squad scans the room to make sure the killer isn't still in there with them. Adam walks over to the body and examines it. He quickly realizes that Hoadley hasn't been murdered at all. He sees that Baron Hoadley's body has been drastically modified using anomalous technology. The Overseer used his immortality to modify almost every part of his body to make himself stronger. Unfortunately for Baron Hoadley, when the Overseer's deal with death was broken by Calvin, the modifications to his body slowly tore him apart. His regular body could no longer support all of the modifications, and what once made him practically invincible became the very thing that destroyed him. The team leaves the castle and crosses 05-8 off their list. On their way out, Adam pulls Calvin aside. He has the feeling that Anthony hasn't been completely honest with the rest of the team. He had the feeling that Anthony was hiding something from them. Calvin had similar thoughts recently. He pushes Anthony for more information about his past, and Anthony reveals that he's over 100 years old. The vial of water from the Fountain of Youth that Calvin has was not the only one. Early in his career with the insurgency, he had confiscated other vials from a Foundation site. His squad drank the water and it extended their lives. He asks Calvin on what he plans on doing with his water from the fountain. "I'm going to destroy it," Calvin tells him. Anthony agrees with this plan. Once you drink from the Fountain of Youth, you may extend your life, but a part of you dies at the same time. Vibrancy of the senses disappears, leading to a seemingly shallow life. If Anthony could go back and do it again, he never would have drank the water. Calvin receives intel from the insurgency that the 7th Overseer is in a small town in Cambodia. The kill squad makes their way to the village and surveys the area, hoping to get a glimpse at the Overseer, who is codenamed Green. As the team conducts reconnaissance, Anthony tells them that he thinks the mission is a setup. It is too remote, and there are so many unknown variables. But Calvin is convinced that this might be their only chance to kill Green. Since Green arrived in the area, there has been non-stop chaos. She has destabilized the local governments, and now the area is in an all-out war. The team weaves through narrow passageways between houses and buildings, trying to make their way to the central compound where Green is located. Suddenly, a mob starts to form. They are getting closer and closer to the team. In a quick decision to avoid being seen, Calvin orders everyone into a nearby building. Before Anthony can follow, the mob rounds the corner. They spot Anthony, and he's forced to flee. Calvin, Olivia, and Adam watch as the mob chases after Anthony, but they have to keep moving. Calvin knows that Anthony can take care of himself, and they are too close to their goal to stop now. Calvin slowly opens the front door of the house they are hiding in and peers out. The coast looks clear, so he signals Olivia and Adam to follow him. Before they can step out into the street, a gas canister enters through a cracked doorway. The room fills with sleeping gas and the team passes out. When they are awake, they are tied up in a large room with marble vaulted ceilings. 05-7 is standing in front of Calvin. She smiles wickedly while holding a knife. She compliments Calvin on what he and his team have been able to do so far. No one believed they could pull off even a fraction of what they have. But now she has an offer for Calvin. She points towards Adam and Olivia and tells Calvin he must choose one of them to die. If he doesn't, she'll kill the leader of the rioters and plunge another part of the country into chaos. "Screw you," is Calvin's response. "Very well," utters Green. Have it your way. She assassinates the leader being held in her compound, then turns back to Calvin. She now threatens to torture his team until Calvin makes a choice of who to kill. Green slashes Adam's cheek with her knife as Calvin screams for Green to leave his team alone and torture him instead. Green just smiles. I'm going to enjoy killing your friends while you watch, as you have killed so many of my overseers on the council. She reaches up in the air with the knife above Adam's head. Before she can plunge the knife through his skull, a bullet passes through her hand, causing her to drop the knife. Anthony kneels on a rooftop across the courtyard, smoking sniper rifles still pointed at Green, who runs. Calvin uses the dropped knife to cut his ropes and chases after Green. He follows her to the roof where he watches as she boards a helicopter. The aircraft lifts off as Anthony fires at it from his original position, but does no serious damage. In the plaza below, the mob that has separated the team earlier becomes restless. There is complete chaos and someone fires a rocket at the fleeing helicopter. The rocket hits the tail of the aircraft, sending it crashing into the plaza full of rioters below as the crowd flees from the scene. Calvin makes his way towards the wreckage and reaches it at the same time Anthony does. Calvin looks at him, smiles, and thanks him for saving his life. Anthony smiles back, but before he can say anything, a gunshot rings out and a bullet rips through his neck. Calvin turns to see where it came from and is horrified to see the burning body of 05-7. Her skin has been charred black, but in her burnt hand she holds a gun. What's left of her lips curl back in a sinister grin as she fires again and hits Anthony in the chest. He falls to the ground. Calvin runs to him and pulls out his gun to shoot 05-7, but she is already dead. Calvin holds his dying teammate as blood pours out of his neck and chest, but Calvin can stop this. He pulls out the vial of water from the fountain. No, winces Anthony. I have lived long enough. Thank you, my friend. I will see you in whatever lies beyond this life. Anthony's chest rises, then falls. It does not rise again. Olivia and Adam round the corner to see Calvin holding the lifeless body of their teammate, tears flowing from his eyes. The team holds a small ceremony and burial for Anthony, but are only halfway through their mission and can't stop now. They fly back to the United States, where an undercover insurgency agent named Kowalski informs them that 05-6 is already aware they're after him. This overseer is codenamed the American because he has the power of the entire US military at his fingertips. The kill squad scouts the base where the American is located. Kowalski warns them of a crate that was recently brought to the base from Site 19. The Americans showed great interest in whatever was in the container. The group sets up a camp on a hill overlooking the base. As the sun slowly rises the next day, the kill squad is spotted by a drone and forced to hop in their jeep and try to run. They make their way down the hill, finding themselves in the valley below with no clear exit. In front of them lands a helicopter as Humvees roar into the canyon behind them. The team is surrounded. A jeep pulls up and 05-6 steps out. He introduces himself as Rufus King, member of the Overseer Council, but an American citizen first and foremost. All he really wants is to protect the country he loves. Thanks to you, I've lost my immortality and can no longer effectively protect the United States anymore, the American says to Calvin. But I'm willing to make a deal. Your freedom for the spear of the non-believer. Rumor has it that you have the spear in your possession, and you used it to kill the archivist. You give me the spear, I will let you go. No, replies Calvin. I will never give an overseer the means to cause more destruction. The spear stays with us. Very well, the American says with a frown. Then I suppose my only other option is to take it from you, but not without giving you a fair chance. Run, Calvin Lucian. Run as fast as you can. I will be coming for you. The American turns and walks towards the container from Site 19, which is being lowered from a helicopter hovering above them. Calvin sprints back to the jeep with the other members of his team. As they drive away, they hear a horrible, guttural screech from whatever was inside the container. After a few moments, the army begins to pursue them. Out in front of the military force is 05-6 riding SCPs 682. He is using a black whip to urge the creature forward, and they're gaining on the kill squad. Fast. A row of vehicles pulls up beside the American and SCP-682. Then something strange happens. A man appears in front of the oncoming forces led by the American. The man's skin bulges and seems to be moving from within. The skin of the man sloughs from his body. The infection that is SCP-610 erupts out of him and onto the soldiers in the nearby jeep. SCP-610 begins to infect and consume everyone around it. Suddenly, there are thousands of instances of SCP-610 coming from the mountainside, flooding into the valley. They close in and around the army and O5-6. The American begins fighting off the flesh-eating creatures from the back of SCP-682, but he becomes overwhelmed. He can no longer focus on pursuing Calvin and his team. From the back of the jeep, Olivia pulls out her rifle. She aims and fires. The bullet hits the American in the chest. He is flung off the back of SCP-682 and engulfed in a sea of SCP-610 creatures. The kill squad continues to drive, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the SCP-610 infestation as possible. But then Calvin suddenly slams on the brake. Standing in front of them is a man in a black suit and bow tie. He introduces himself as Blackbird, the 5th Overseer. According to the journal, his actual name is Mortimer J. Denning von Krochnicker. He stands in front of the jeep with a menacing grin. "You have been causing a lot of trouble," he says, looking at Calvin. Olivia swings her gun around. "Oh, please, my dear, that won't help you," von Krochnicker says. He pulls out a knife and stabs himself through the neck. He falls to the ground, apparently dead. There is a gust of wind, a whiff of ozone, and an identical copy and still very much alive von Krochnicker lands next to his own dead body. "See what I mean?" he says. Olivia lowers her rifle. "Come with me, I have something to show you." The Blackbird beckons. Seeing no other option, Calvin, Olivia, and Adam exit the jeep and follow the Blackbird. As they walk, the world changes around them. The desert mountains fade away into blackness and find themselves in the near-apocalyptic London. "Oh, it's good to be home," the Blackbird says as they emerge onto a cobblestone street. "You cannot stop the Overseer's plans. However, I can give you an alternative. Let's see if any of you will take it." In front of each kill squad member appears a door. They have an uncontrollable urge to open their respective door and walk through. The Blackbird stands smiling as he watches Calvin, Olivia, and Adam enter each of their portals. Adam enters his door and looks around. He is in Portland. His parents walk into the room. In this universe, his family has been granted asylum. Adam never has to interact with any SCPs or the Foundation. He is free to live a normal life. From the kitchen comes Calvin wearing an apron. He is holding a steaming pot. Adam locks eyes with Calvin, who smiles at him. The Blackbird whispers into Adam's ear. "In this reality, both of your parents and siblings are still alive. Also, the man you love loves you back. You and Calvin could be married if you stayed here. Wouldn't that be nice?" Olivia enters her door. She is on the deck of a yacht. At the bow sits an easel with art supplies. The man that Olivia once loved walks across the deck towards her. The Blackbird looms over her. "In this reality, you didn't accidentally kill him. This could be your happily ever after. Wouldn't that be nice?" Calvin steps through his door. He is in a grassy clearing near a lake. The Blackbird hisses in Calvin's ear. "I'm giving you the opportunity to save your mother this time, Calvin. You were just a scared little boy. But in this reality, you can be brave. You can actually save your mother from her fate." "No!" Calvin screams. "This isn't real!" The Blackbird cackles. Calvin looks away from the lake and towards the tree line. Hidden in the shadows, he can just barely make out a hooded figure. Calvin walks towards it. The Blackbird follows. He is screaming at the person in the tree line. "I was only trying to help!" The hooded figure reaches out and hands Calvin a metal tube. He opens it to find a set of eyeglasses inside. Calvin puts them on and turns to look at the Blackbird. He steps back in horror. The glasses have revealed the true form of the Blackbird. He is a winged pseudo-avian monstrosity full of rage. The mysterious hooded figure directs Calvin to open the tube again. Inside is an interdimensional fishing line made by Dr. Wondertainment and a white wiffle ball bat. Calvin grabs the fishing line and wraps it around O5-5's leg. The Blackbird flies into the air trying to get away from Calvin, but Calvin wraps the other end of the fishing line around his arm. The Blackbird begins to jump from dimension to dimension trying to get rid of Calvin. They appear on the deck of SCP-455, in Site-19 where SCP-682 walks freely, in the dead world of SCP-2935. Every time they stop in a new dimension, Calvin takes the opportunity to attack the Blackbird with the bat, and it seems that he is slowly weakening the monster. They finally land at the bottom of a deep well Foundation containment site, where the dark body that is SCP-001 is contained. Standing in front of the containment field is Allison Cho, the Black Queen, whose sole mission is to destroy the Foundation.
"You!"
cries the Blackbird.
"You are the one who has been helping Lucien!"
The Black Queen nods her head. Yes, I have been helping Calvin Lucien to eliminate you and the other overseers. The Foundation must fall.
"You are nothing! You cannot stop me! I am the Black King!"
screams 05-5. Allison Cho sighs. She pushes a button on the panel next to her, shutting down the array containing the dark body. Out of the cloud of dust appears SCP-001, a massive black creature who seemed to absorb all light.
"No, stop!"
shrieks the Blackbird. SCP-001 does not move, but the room begins to shake. The Blackbird continues to scream as his body folds in on itself, until he is reduced to a single superheated point, and then blinks out of existence. Allison Chow then reactivates the containment array, sealing 001 away once again. I will return you to your reality along with your friends, says the Black Queen. But perhaps our paths shall cross again, Calvin Lucien. There is a bright flash of light, and Calvin finds himself on a private jet sitting next to Olivia and Adam. They are all shaken, but the Blackbird is dead. 05-5 has been eliminated. The three members of the team sit silently, still pondering what might have been if they stayed in the alternate realities. Suddenly, the phone on the plane begins to ring, breaking the silence. Calvin picks it up. On the other line is the fourth overseer. He has contacted Calvin to discuss surrendering to the insurgency. Unfortunately, things do not always go as planned. Calvin Lucien is about to make the most difficult and dangerous decision of his life. A D-Class drag races through the testing zone, screaming at the top of his lungs and doing donuts. A mime who is also in the testing chamber stares with disapproval, tapping his foot impatiently. Did we mention that the car is made of spiders? Yeah, this one is going to be a weird one, folks. Stay tuned for one of the craziest SCP stories you've ever heard. Emily had always dreamed of taking a trip to Paris. When the opportunity actually came to visit the city, she was overjoyed. She spent her time exploring art museums, tasting the bread and cheese, and walking through the city streets, taking in the sights. One of her favorite things about Paris was all of the street performers. As she walked, nibbling on a pain au chocolat, she delighted in the antics of jugglers, tossing colorful balls into the air. She gasped at the feat of athleticism and grace demonstrated by acrobats and contortionists. She giggled at the absurd shows put on by puppeteers and dabbed tears from her eyes at the sound of beautiful songs played and sung by musicians. It became part of her daily routine. One night, as Emily was walking back to her hostel after a long, languid dinner, she found herself walking down a street she had not encountered before. There was no one around except for her. It was a lovely moment of peace, but it also struck her as a little bit eerie, and she wished for the familiar throngs of people. Up ahead, she spotted the silhouette of another person and let out a sigh of relief. As she got closer, she could make out the black and white striped shirt, the suspenders, the black beret, the white face makeup, rouged cheeks, and red lips. A mime. A real, classic French mime. She couldn't believe her luck. When he spotted Emily approaching, the mime began to start a performance. He began with a classic, The Invisible Box. He felt around the walls of the invisible box, looking out with exaggerated wide eyes and an open mouth. Emily clapped and reached into her bag for a little bit of money she could use to tip him. After all, he was putting on a performance just for her. He deserved it. She walked closer to the mime, looking for a place to put her tip. She didn't see one, so she held up her hand, offering the money directly to the mime. As he took notice of how close she was getting, the mime began shaking his head vigorously, eyes wide and insistent. She didn't understand that he was trying to warn her until it was too late. Dozens and dozens of spiders began to crawl over the mime's face, out from inside of his clothes, from his shoes, pouring out over the street, and crawling up onto Emily. She tried to brush them off, she tried to run away, but no matter how hard she tried, the spiders just kept coming. All she could do was scream. In an attempt to experience a little bit of live performance, Emily unwittingly came across SCP-3247. SCP-3247 is a humanoid entity standing at approximately 1.7 meters in height. It wears a striped shirt and suspenders similar to the garb of a stereotypical French mime, as well as what appears to be white makeup on its face and all other exposed skin. Though these aspects of its appearance seem as if they should be removable, the clothing and makeup are, in fact, parts of the entity's physiology and cannot be removed from its body. This is not the only unusual aspect of the entity's physical form. Though it looks corporeal and solid, the entity cannot touch or directly interact with any solid matter, with one particular exception. There is a colony of spiders living on and inside of SCP-3247. These spiders have officially been designated SCP-3247-A and are highly protective of SCP-3247. If anyone or anything attempts to approach SCP-3247 in a threatening manner, the spiders will swarm the potential threat. As any savvy anomalous activity enthusiast might have already gathered, these are, of course, no ordinary spiders. Not only do they dwell on and in an intangible mime, but they have a peculiar response to witnessing a human being making specific gestures or pantomiming activities. When this occurs, the colony of spiders will form the shape of an object related to the gestures, which they will then hold for up to 3 hours, or until given additional stimuli that prompt a change in shape. While the spider colony is assembled into shape, they will be able to share some of the given object's functions in spite of being technically nothing more than a mass of well-coordinated arachnids. As for SCP-3247, it is either incapable of speech or unwilling to speak. Instead, it communicates with Foundation staff via silent miming. When it does, the spiders will frequently react to its gestures, becoming effectively living props. SCP-3247 does not seem to be especially thrilled with this, likely because miming is inherently a propless art form, and these spider-based props undermine its artistic vision. Otherwise, though, the presence of the spiders does not seem to bother SCP-3247. In order to better understand the nature of SCP-3247-A, Foundation staff conducted a series of tests. In each test, a D-Class was given a gesture to perform in the presence of SCP-3247. Then, the research staff would record the spider colony's response. During the first test, the research staff ordered D-11424 to attempt to get as close to SCP-3247 as possible. They did not, of course, warn him about the spiders. He entered the testing chamber and approached the mime, who was pantomiming the act of climbing stairs. As the mime pretended to ascend an invisible staircase and D-11424 grew closer, instances of SCP-3247-A emerged to take the shape of a staircase, much to the mime's frustration. SCP-3247 stopped its performance, throwing up its hands in a gesture of defeat. The spiders turned their attention to D-11424 and began to swarm him, treating him as a potential threat. Panicking and unsure how to communicate with SCP-3247 while the spiders were overpowering him, D-11424 began to wave frantically at the mime. The mime simply shrugged, giving him a look that said,
"Well, what do you want me to do about it?"
At this point, Control intervened, instructing D-11424 to pantomime some kind of activity. Fortunately, before turning to a life of crime, D-11424 had spent several years in a professional improv troupe and was well acquainted with pantomime. His performing instincts kicked in, and he leapt into action. He put a hand to his ear as if listening to the ringing of a telephone. The spiders stopped their attack, responding immediately to his cue. They formed into the shape of a small table, with an old-fashioned rotary phone on top. The mime rolled its eyes in disdain at the sight of this prop-based performance, but D-11424 was on a roll. He crossed to the phone, picked up the receiver, and held it to his ear. "Hello?" he asked out of habit. He wasn't expecting to hear a voice on the other line, but then he did. Or rather, he heard the approximation of a human voice. created by a swarm of anomalous spiders. It sounded a bit like a human voice sped up, high-pitched, and squeaky, speaking some sort of gibberish. Realizing that this was his moment to escape, D11424 placed the phone back in place and promptly left the testing chamber. The spiders remained in the shape of the rotary phone and the table for the next 2 hours, at which point they disassembled and returned to their home on SCP-3247. After his surprisingly creative work in this first test, it was decided that D11424 would be the designated test subject for all future testing with SCP-3247, provided that additional complications did not arise. Though he wasn't especially fond of spiders, D11424 was more than happy to accept the assignment, not that he had much choice in the matter. Still, it was definitely a better deal than getting fed to SCP-682, and it was a nice excuse to use his improv skills again after a long retirement. During the second test, D11424 knew what to expect from SCP-3247. For this test, he was told to pantomime playing tug-of-war with an invisible opponent and an invisible rope. Now that he knew his improvisational scene partner would be a colony of spiders, he was able to enter the testing chamber with confidence. Once inside, he began to pantomime, pulling on a rope, having that rope tugged away from him by a strong opponent, and struggling to pull back. The spiders reacted right away, arranging themselves into the shapes of a long rope, one side of which was in D11424's hands, as well as a large humanoid, vaguely muscular in shape, that was holding the other side of the rope. The spiders gave the rope a sharp tug, causing D11424 to lose his balance and fall over, the rope slipping out of his grasp. Aside from some injury to his pride, he was otherwise unharmed. During test number 3, D11424 was instructed to enter the testing chamber and close his fist, while extending the thumb and index finger in a gesture colloquially known as finger guns. Sure enough, as soon as he assumed this position, the spiders assembled into the shape of a handgun. D11424 was then instructed to pick up the spider gun and squeeze the place where the trigger would be if it was a real gun and not, spiders. A loud cracking sound was heard when the D-class squeezed, as a spider shot out of the barrel of the gun at high speed before smacking into the nearby wall, leaving a small hole in the surface. D11424 fired several more times, each shot firing an individual spider at a pace that attending researchers described as faster than a speeding bullet. After firing 6 rounds of spiders at the wall, D11424 was instructed to place the spider gun back on the ground. During test number 76, D11424 was ordered to hold his hands together and wiggle 4 fingers on each hand, effectively pantomiming a spider. The research team was curious to see what the spiders would do when presented with a shape that matched their usual unassembled form. SCP-3247, who generally did not react much to the experiments on its spiders, began shaking its head in mild disappointment as approximately 640 spiders emerged from its body, dividing themselves into groups of 8. Each group of 8 spiders then joined to form one large spider, leaving 8 spiders. These 8 then split into pairs, who joined together into one larger spider, and so on and so forth until there was one single giant spider made from the hundreds of smaller spiders. At this point, D11424 followed his heart, jumping onto the mega spider's back and riding it like a bull at the rodeo, as the spider bucked and ran back and forth across the room. According to official transcripts, D11424 yelled "Yee-haw" throughout this part of the test, until the head researcher ordered him to climb down from the spider and exit the room. He was reprimanded for his behavior and warned that if he acted without approval again, he would be taken off the project and reassigned to a much less enjoyable position as one of the designated eyes on SCP-173. D11424 immediately agreed to comply with future instructions. During test number 133, D11424 was sent into the testing chamber and told to shadowbox. He danced back and forth across the cell, doing his best Sylvester Stallone impression and throwing punches in the general direction of the spiders. In response, approximately 3,000 spiders poured out of SCP-3247, assembling into the shadowy shape of a boxer, and began to attack D11424. The mass of spiders conducted itself at the level of a professional boxer, dodging D11424's hits before coming back at him with a jab, cross, lead uppercut, and rear uppercut before he could defend himself. D11-424 fell to the ground unconscious, and guards were forced to interrupt the test in order to remove him from the room and take him to the infirmary for medical treatment. After taking some time to recuperate, D11-424 returned to testing with SCP-3247-A. He was instructed to mime steering a wheel, such as that of a car. Immediately, a number of spiders previously unseen during testing emerged from SCP-3247, arranging themselves into the shape of a sedan. D11-424 was then commanded to climb inside of the spider car and see if he could start it. He refused, insisting,
I'm not getting in a spider car, are you nuts?
When pressed by Control to comply with orders, he made a rude hand gesture. I'll let you guess what that was. The spiders began to scramble to reassemble themselves in response to the changed gesture, prompting Control to stop the test early to spare the researchers' sensibilities. With strict guidelines to avoid inappropriate or violent gestures, D11-424 was sent back into the testing chamber with instruction to try out a variety of animal-inspired gestures in rapid succession. He formed one hand into a fist and made a peace sign with the other hand, putting them together to make a snail. As he made his hand snail crawl through the air, the spiders crawled onto the floor and assembled into the shape of a snail in front of D11-424. Though the spiders moved quickly, at their usual scuttling pace, once they formed into the snail, they slowed to a gradual creep. D11-424 noted a shiny, slimy trail left behind on the floor as the spider snail moved. He was asked to consider touching it, but refused, simply stating, "Ew, no." Next, he took his hands and formed the shape of a wolf's head howling at the moon. The research staff were curious to see if the spiders would form a wolf's head or the animal's entire body. They got their answer as the spiders swarmed and shifted, forming the shape of a full-sized gray wolf. The wolf padded back and forth across the room before sitting down, lifting its head, and emitting an audible howl that sounded almost indistinguishable from the real thing. Next, D11-424 crossed his thumbs over each other, fluttering hands like a pair of wings. The spiders separated into smaller groups and came together to form butterflies similar in size to a monarch. These spider butterflies began to flap their wings and, much to D11-424's surprise, they took flight and swirled through the air around him. The D-Class was so moved by the beautiful sight that he shed a single tear, which he promptly wiped away out of embarrassment. Control then prompted him to try the next animal gesture. D11-424 used his hands to form the shape of a rabbit. Several of the spiders crawled away, returning to SCP-3247, and the remaining spiders took on the form of a rabbit. The spider rabbit hopped realistically around the room, twitching its ears and tail. At this point, D11-424 was instructed to offer the spider rabbit a carrot. He produced a carrot from his pocket, holding it out in front of him. The spider rabbit hopped over to him and, one crunch at a time, began to eat the carrot until none remained. D11-424 appeared shaken up and asked to leave the testing chamber. As he followed all of his instructions, this request was granted. When he exited the chamber, all he would say was, "Where the hell did the carrot go? It doesn't have a stomach, it doesn't have a mouth, where did it go?" SCP-3247 is kept in an isolated chamber located in the arachnid wing of Area 12. It does not appear to require food or rest, but it has been provided with a television and a collection of silent films for morale purposes. Instances of SCP-3247-A are fed via a fully automated system that dispenses 20 grams of live crickets every week. Should a containment breach occur, staff have been instructed to find a way to make escaped spiders take on the shape that renders them motionless, then simply pick the spider cluster up and place it back inside of the cell. It is unlikely that the Foundation will ever get an explanation for where the intangible Mime and his merry band of spider performers originated from. But one thing is clear, they won't be performing in public again anytime soon. Robert Orlean and his partner in crime, John Streep, zipped through the murky waters of the Louisiana Bayou on a speedboat. These men were dealers in the illicit, but their specialty was not any kind of contraband you'd probably recognize. Orlean and Streep dealt in rare orchids, illegally poached from areas where they're considered endangered and sold to high-paying rare plant collectors. As any seller or collector knows, rarity is the hallmark of value, and what these two men would encounter in the swamp that day was truly one of a kind. The problem for this pair of greedy opportunists is that only one of them would live to tell the tale, and thanks to the SCP Foundation, the other wouldn't remember it for long. That's what happens when you have a dangerous run-in with a certain mean green swamp-dwelling creature that doesn't take kindly to unwanted visitors. And no, we're not talking about a crocodile. Orlean and Streep continued through the swamp, keeping their keen eyes out for the flash of light blue that'd give away the orchids they were seeking. Little did they know, from the murky darkness between the reeds, a pair of big yellow eyes were watching them back. They were intruders in a stranger's land, threats, just like the bad man. They would need to be dealt with accordingly, or a grim history would repeat itself. The boat came to a halt as the two poachers finally saw one of the rare flowers they were looking for arising out of the muck. Orlean leaped from the boat and began wading towards his prize. The flower would fetch him and his partner a pretty penny if they could get it back in good condition. The motions were so well practiced for Orlean, so automatic, that he didn't even notice something was moving through the waters towards him. Gators and snakes were an occupational hazard for people like Orlean. He kept a revolver holstered just below his shoulder as a precaution, but the thing about to kill him was unlike anything he'd ever faced before. Just as his careful fingers curled around the orchid's stem, Orlean heard Streep screaming from the boat. He was frantically pointing at something just beyond Orlean, emerging from the reeds. Orlean turned and felt his jaw falling open in horror at the sight of it. At first it seemed almost like a waterlogged corpse. Thick, matted black hair, heavy with grease and muddy bog water, teeming with parasitic swamp life. Her skin was green and bumpy, like that of a toad, dripping with viscous green sweat that seemed like it could only be the byproduct of rot. But those eyes, those big yellow amphibian eyes, they were alive as they were inhuman. This creature wasn't a corpse, it was something else entirely. Her body cleared the water, standing at Orlean's height now and facing him eye to eye. She was naked, her dignity preserved by her long tangle of hair. Her body was human-shaped, except for her freakishly long, thin limbs. Her belly appeared visibly bloated or engorged, like a woman in the mid-stages of pregnancy. Orlean had never smelled something so foul in his entire life, which was mostly spent wading through swamps and bogs. She smelled like death itself. Streep was screaming for Orlean to climb back into the boat, but Orlean knew it was already too late. He reached for his holstered pistol, but before he could clear leather, the creature let out a horrific guttural hawking noise and spewed a stream of black goo onto Orlean's face. It was hot, sticky, and foul-tasting, like a kind of tar rendered from corpses. It plastered his open mouth and nose shut and began to suffocate him. He tried desperately to claw at his face and tear the offending substance away, but all that succeeded in doing was getting his fingers stuck. While Orlean suffocated and Streep screamed terrified obscenities from the boat, the creature just watched and smiled through rotten teeth. It was nice to see them panic, just like the bad man who'd come before. They were in the wrong. They deserved this. Orlean soon realized that nothing he could do would save himself. He'd spent his life in a dangerous profession and been lucky until now. But the Reaper catches up with everyone eventually. The last thing he saw as the world went black was this creature, this swamp woman, wading towards him through the water with a hungry look in her eye. She grabbed him on either side of his face and just held him there. What was that sound? Was it fizzling, like something was burning or even melting? She just kept staring and smiling with those awful rotten teeth. Robert Orlean went to sleep in her hands and never woke up. Back on the boat, a desperate John Streep was watching a scene that, if it wasn't for the later intervention of the SCP Foundation, would haunt him until his dying day. He watched his partner undergo a process that was somewhere between rotting and melting. He withered away in the swamp woman's hands, degrading into thick black sludge that she drank through her thirsty skin. As much as it pained him to leave his friend behind, Streep knew that there was no saving him now. All he could possibly do was escape with his own life. He pulled the ripcord on the boat's motor and tore his way back to the nearest township, the shape of the nightmarish swamp woman shrinking in the distance behind him. When he ran into the local police station, half mad with grief and fear, screaming about the monster that had killed his friend in the swamp, the police understandably detained him for further questioning. When his criminal history as a poacher was flagged up on the database, it became clear he probably wasn't leaving for a while. That's when a Foundation agent embedded in the department passed a memo about the case's strangeness up the chain of command, and a covert mobile task force was soon dispatched to the swamp in order to locate and capture the anomalous creature that Streep had claimed took his friend's life. After a few days of searching, the swamp woman was captured by the Foundation and redesignated as SCP-811 before being delivered back to a nearby containment site. Luckily for Foundation disinformation agents, the cover story was practically gift wrap for them on this one. It had been a dispute between two hardcore criminals, and as the saying goes, there's no honor among thieves. Streep had murdered Orlean over a pay cut dispute, and thrown him into the swamp where his body was eaten by gators. A few falsified records and implanted memories later, and the Foundation was free to do what it pleased with SCP-811. But the swamp woman would prove to be full of surprises and contradictions. While designated as Euclid, the containment procedures for the creature were rather extensive for its own benefit. Like a lot of creatures who'd never existed in captivity before, it had very specific needs in terms of its artificial habitat. The Foundation needed to be on top of everything from the pH levels of its soil acidity to the optimal temperatures and humidity levels of its containment chamber, built to resemble the creature's natural swamp habitat. The swamp woman is mostly non-aggressive to Foundation staff, but certain precautions need to be taken in order to ensure everyone's safety around her. While she's largely humanoid, her internal physiology vastly differs from that of humans. Her veins and digestive system are non-functional. She consumes her prey by melting it into black sludge with the highly caustic secretions of her skin, before absorbing it back through her pores. The waste material collects in her stomach, which she then expels voluntarily through an action similar to vomiting. This is often used defensively or in hunting prey, as the unfortunate Robert Orlean found out. As a result, people working in 811's containment chamber need to do so in pairs and wear heavily sealed hazmat suits for obvious safety reasons. The creature also proved to be surprisingly intelligent. While not a genius by any means, it was no mere mindless animal. The swamp woman had an intellect and communication skills on par with your average feral child, the one that had been brought up and socialized in a relatively normal home before being turned loose and experiencing a decline in its mental and social development. Her words have a childlike construction to them, as though English isn't her native language, and she's still in the very early stages of learning it. She gave herself a name, I, and began to cooperate well with Foundation staff in exchange for having her needs met. Since being brought into containment, she's made a number of requests. These include some requests that have been denied by the Foundation, such as the regular provision of bovine prey for its chamber, and a variety of fish from its native environment to make it feel more at home. However, there are some requests that the Foundation has approved, like a wooden hairbrush and a D-class in a hazmat suit entering the room daily, in order to help wash her hair, often bogged down by the frequency at which her skin produces thick, caustic oils. In one particularly strange request, she asked for a turtle in a hazmat suit to act as a companion in her containment chamber, as she reacted negatively to the idea of having turtles as food. Sadly, this was one of the denied requests. SCP-811 was also involved in a few cross-tests with other anomalies, leading to curious results. After realizing just how dangerous SCP-811 secretions could be, Foundation researchers naturally floated the idea of using it on SCP-682 in its seemingly endless termination experiments. A sample of 682's flesh was successfully decayed by the dangerous mucus, so a larger quantity collected over a number of months was then sprayed all over the beast. It managed to reduce 682's body mass by 27%, melting its way through the covered flesh down to the bone. However, at that point, it was unable to decay further, and SCP-682 soon returned back to its normal state. Who could have possibly seen that coming? right? However, a much more interesting and enlightening cross-test occurred with SCP-978, the Desire Camera. If you haven't already seen our video on the Desire Camera, it's pretty much exactly what the name suggests. A Polaroid camera that reveals the deepest desire of its subject. And the Foundation decided to test it on a large number of staff and anomalies, one of those being SCP-811. When a photograph was taken of SCP-811 just staring at the camera, the resulting photo depicted a human woman with the same height, build, and facial features as SCP-811, braiding yellow ribbons into her hair and wearing a blue sundress. The attending researchers felt this raised an interesting question. Were they looking at an aspiration towards humanity from SCP-811? Or was this a yearning to return to what had been before? There was only one way to find out. Conduct an interview with the creature itself. When the interview began, the researchers pressed 811 on some of her earliest memories. One of the key details she shared was regarding a mysterious man whom she claimed came to her before she looked like she did now, back when her skin was soft and pink. The Bad Man. He injected something into her arm, and whatever it was, it changed her, mutated her, took away her precious humanity. The first thing she remembered feeling after that was an all-consuming hunger, and then melting and devouring the one who changed her, destroying any possible answers as to who he was or why he did it in the process. It was a story of victimization and dehumanization so cruel and upsetting that researcher Watchtel, an assistant researcher attending the interview, actually threw up. Later debriefing interviews revealed it was because he had a daughter of roughly the same age, with long dark hair. If SCP-811 has any parents herself, we may never know. Such is the strange tragedy of SCP-811. Whether you wish to call her by her number, a nickname like the Swamp Woman, or her self-given name of Ai, will likely never know who she was before, as not even she knows now. It is an unsettling reminder that all of our grasps on humanity are looser than you think. Sometimes all it takes is one chance encounter to change who you are completely. The SCP Foundation employs hundreds of different procedures in the containment of the many anomalies held in their walls. From hermetically sealed steel boxes to ordinary observation rooms, it is extremely common for the entities in containment to attempt an escape, and the Foundation has measures in place to protect against these breaches and the damage that they can cause. However, there was one SCP in containment that presented an abnormally constant hazard. It wasn't the entity in captivity, though, that created the danger. No, it was the constant threat from two additional creatures that were intent on getting to the captured entity and removing it from the Foundation's grasp, and they were willing to destroy anything that got in their way. This is the rather unique problem with SCP-1913, which refers not to a single entity, but to three. One in containment, and two that would stop at nothing to get to it. This is the story of SCP-1913, the strange team made up of Agatha, Telly, and Freddy, better known as the Furies. SCP-1913 consists of three separate entities, referred to as SCP-1913-1, SCP-1913-2, and SCP-1913-3. After the initial discovery of SCP-1913 and its containment at an SCP Foundation site, the site was attacked by SCP-1913-2 and SCP-1913-3. It seemed to be an attempted jailbreak of sorts, with 2 and 3 determined to free 1 from captivity at all costs. After this initial attack, the three entities were classified together as SCP-1913, and their behaviors and fates were undoubtedly intertwined. Whenever SCP-1913-1 was taken, the other two would follow. As part of SCP-1913's containment procedures, Convoy Omega-8, also known as the Cats in the Cradle, was formed. This team, run by a team of scientists that included the young and woefully inexperienced Dr. Hayward, was tasked with handling the containment, research, and movement of SCP-1913-1, as well as managing the inevitable attacks by the other two entities. SCP-1913-1 is a ceramic statue of a cat, 20.5 centimeters in height. It has the name Agatha written on the bottom. resulting in the entity often being referred to by that name. It is painted white on the nose, ears, and forehead, and has a black ink-like pigment around its eyes, mouth, and paws. It has displayed sentience and is capable of speech. When Agatha talks, it has the voice of a young woman, though the statue's mouth does not move when it speaks. Agatha is not friendly toward the Foundation staff, but will answer questions when its container is shaken. Though Agatha cannot move on its own, it should be treated with extreme caution and only touched when absolutely necessary. This is due to the nature of the ink on its eyes, mouth, and paws. If it comes into contact with the skin of a living thing, the ink will soak into its pores. The area touched by the ink will begin to dissolve and disappear until the entire body has been dissolved. Horrifyingly, the affected individual does not die until their entire body has dissolved, even if they have lost vital organs. Arms and legs left after the head and torso have dissolved will continue to move on their own, moving around and grabbing at objects. The effects of the ink can be stopped if it is washed off on the skin before any dissolution can take place, though this will often still leave scars. SCP-1913-2 is a humanoid skeleton covered with dark hair and ash that has the shape of a human female, but with a canine-looking skull, fingers, and toes. It is unnaturally fast, capable of reaching speeds up to 65 kilometers per hour, despite lacking any visible muscle tissue. Unlike SCP-1913-1, the skeleton does not display any sentience or capability for speech. It seems to act on orders given by the other two entities, and attacks anyone wearing a lab coat or the standard armor worn by members of the Cats in the Cradle. It will attack if provoked, and will use its claws to rake at the victim. No matter how much damage it does, SCP-1913-2 is incapable of killing its victims, and they continue to live and suffer until killed by another external force. SCP-1913-3 has previously referred to this entity as Telly, and that nickname now appears in official Foundation documentation as well. The final member of this bizarre trio is SCP-1913-3, which refers to itself as Freddy. Freddy is a creature that shares the appearance of an adolescent male black Labrador retriever, with one notable difference. It does not have a mouth, a nose, or eyes. Instead, its face is made up of an array of holes in the shape of a terrifying grin, emitting a white light. Freddy is intelligent and capable of communication, though it refuses to explain its pursuit of Agatha. When asked about the subject, its only response is that this is a family matter. When Freddy attacks something, it produces a burst of gray flames from its face holes. These flames have been measured reaching temperatures up to 1200 degrees Celsius. These flames burn non-living objects in a relatively normal way, but when the fire comes in contact with a living thing, the flames continue to burn until the subject's skin has been entirely burnt away, or until the flame has been deliberately extinguished. Freddy has caused severe burns to Foundation personnel, often resulting in loss of sight, hearing, and touch. Through unknown means, though likely because of a psychic connection of some kind, Freddy is able to know the location of Telly and Agatha at any given time. Now that you know the members of SCP-1913 and exactly what they are capable of, it is time to get into the events of Encounter 029. Most of what we know about the event comes from the testimony of Agent Crowley, who was present for the ordeal. He related the events to Dr. Toki in Interview 1913-A, providing a glimpse into what exactly happened. According to Agent Crowley, it was a mistake for Dr. Hayward to be appointed to a position in the Cats in the Cradle. He was too new to the work, too green, and something was bound to go wrong. Crowley insists that Hayward should have been assigned to a safer group first, in order to build experience, and that what happened to him was not his fault. The Cats in the Cradle were transporting Agatha to a new location when they realized they were running low on food and fuel. They made a stop at Site 45-A in order to refresh their stores. It wasn't supposed to take very long, only a few minutes. After all, they had made supply runs many times before, and had it down to a science at this point. It had been days since they had seen Freddy or Telly, however, and the staff was feeling very jumpy. It was too quiet, and after a few days of peace, they had a terrible feeling that something big was coming. As Hayward and Crowley drove into Site 45's garage, a fireball suddenly erupted behind them. A car had exploded. When the dust cleared, there was Freddy and Telly, the faceless dog, and the skeleton. Crowley alerted Site-45, calling the security team and ordering them to evacuate the facility of all personnel immediately. Crowley grabbed Hayward and attempted to make it to the roof where they could evacuate with the rest of the personnel. But before they could make it there, they were intercepted by SCPs 1913-2 and 3. The two men ran into a laboratory and locked the doors behind them, as Freddy and Telly attempted to follow. Telly began to scratch at the door with its claws, but when that didn't work, Freddy ordered Telly to step out of the way. Using its flames, Freddy blew the door off its hinges, triggering the building's sprinkler system. Through the steam and smoke, Freddy casually walked into the room. It didn't attack, nor did it order Telly to attack. It simply made its way over to Crowley and sat in front of him. Crowley asked why it was here, why it was doing this. Freddy simply responded that it was doing this as a service, and that its flame was redemption. In a moment of panic, Dr. Hayward threw a microscope at Freddy. This foolish move only provoked the entity, and it threw Hayward into the counter with a burst of flames. Though Hayward was burned, the water from the sprinkler system prevented him from burning as badly as he could have been. But then, Freddy ordered Telly to kill Hayward for his impudence. Telly picked up Hayward and threw him into the far wall of the laboratory, where he crashed into a shelf full of jars. The jars broke open, covering Hayward with their contents, rocks of sulfur. Telly prepared to charge at Hayward, but suddenly, it stopped. Telly and Freddy both stopped their attack on Hayward, regarding the rocks that covered him with suspicion, even fear. Crowley quickly put two and two together and realized that, for some reason, these two creatures had an intense aversion to sulfur. Gathering more sulfur from the broken jars, he began pelting the two with pieces of the rotten-smelling mineral. Crowley was able to successfully drive Freddy and Telly out of the laboratory and into an area where they could be finally contained once and for all. Crowley then rushed Hayward to the infirmary, where the third-degree burns and a cauterized hole in his chest would need to be immediately treated. Though gravely injured, he would eventually recover from his physical wounds. His psychological wounds were a different story, though. As Agent Crowley said, "I lived to see those things tear out Hayward's heart, and so did he." Currently, all three entities that make up SCP-1913 are in containment at SCP Foundation facilities. Each entity must be contained at least 1,600 kilometers away from the others. Each creature is placed in the middle of a glass ring with a radius of 4 meters, and the inside of each glass ring is filled with sulfur dust. This prevents the entities from reaching each other, and has so far seemed to prevent Freddy from psychically determining the location of the other two. Anyone handling SCP-1913-1 or Agatha must wear latex gloves and avoid any kind of skin contact at all times. If skin contact is made for any reason, the affected individual must immediately wash their hands to remove the ink from their skin. If the ink cannot be removed, the infected staff member must be terminated. Any staff entering the room of SCP-1913-2 must remove their lab coats and armor in order to avoid provoking it. SCP-1913-3 is in a blast and fireproof cell. No one is permitted to enter its containment facility. It is not known for sure what will happen if the three aspects of SCP-1913 are ever allowed to reunite. Some have posited that it will result in the creation of a fourth entity. Some believe that Agatha will change shape or transform somehow. Some believe that something entirely different, unpredictable, and deadly will happen, putting all human life at risk. We can only hope that we never have to find out for sure.
Imagine for a moment that you are a teenager. According to our viewership analytics, some of you watching this won't have to imagine very hard, but some of you will have to really stretch your mind to remember what that time was like. Either way, put yourself in the shoes of an adolescent for a little while. You're anxious and uncomfortable in your body, desperately trying to juggle your responsibilities at school, your burgeoning sense of young adulthood, your social life, the looming specter of the future, and a dozen other things that might make you stress sweat through your hoodie. Somehow, in between the classes and extracurriculars, the standardized tests, and missed party invites, you found someone who wants to go out with you. You're not sure what they see in you, but they must see something. Several months into the relationship, you decide to try and take things to the next level. You wait for your parents to leave town. You pick out the perfect Netflix and chill material, dim the lights, and cozy up together on the couch. You go in for the kiss and, shockingly, it goes over well. Then, just when things are starting to heat up, something doesn't feel quite right. You feel an overwhelming pain wash over your body. There's a flash of blinding bright light that burns into your retinas, and everything goes black. When you finally wake up, your partner is gone. Only a grisly smear of dark blood remaining, staining the couch where they sat like some kind of gory chalk outline. Somehow you know they're gone. They're never coming back, and it is all your fault. It sounds like the opening scene of a horror film, but for one unfortunate young man known as SCP-213, it was all too real. SCP-213 was recovered by the SCP Foundation in Palo Alto, California after his arrest. The local police department brought him in on charges of homicide after he accidentally vaporized his girlfriend. There were undercover Foundation agents in the Palo Alto Police Department who, recognizing this case as evidence of an anomaly, made a report and were ordered to bring the boy in for containment. During the initial attempts to apprehend 213, he vaporized the agents as soon as they made physical contact with him. 4 agents were lost before 213 could be successfully brought into a Foundation facility, where his anomalous properties could be better studied. SCP-213 is able to sever the bonds between atoms in any solid matter he comes into physical contact with. During this process, there is a bright flash of light, and SCP-213 experiences extreme pain, often to the point of passing out. Like most sentient beings in containment, he is considered a Euclid-class SCP. SCP-213 was initially contained within a high-security cell in Site-77. The cell is surrounded by a 10-meter-wide zone pumped full of gases that are corrosive to human skin. SCP-213 was informed of the nature of his containment. Outside of the containment unit, 2 armed guards were stationed with high-pressured hoses, pepper spray, and polymer web grenades in case of any escape. However, containment of 213 soon proved difficult, thanks to the nature of his seemingly uncontrollable ability. 213 made 7 escape attempts before one was eventually successful. He requested an interview with the researcher assigned to his case, knowing that when she entered his containment facility, the containment procedures would be temporarily disengaged. He vaporized the remaining containment measures and escaped from his holding cell. The head researcher attempted to grab him by the arm, but was promptly vaporized, dissolving into a pile of blood and tissue. 2 more agents who tried to block 213's path without touching him met similar fates. After making his way into the hall, 213 quickly became disoriented, his mind muddled from a mixture of pain, panic, and lack of familiarity with the layout of the facility. He was unable to find an exit and was cornered in the staff break room, the door barricaded with a chair where he was attempting to vaporize a portion of the floor. At this point, he was too exhausted to disintegrate any more matter and collapsed from exhaustion just as a group of agents broke down the door. He was, with a great deal of care and the use of a gurney to avoid any unnecessary physical contact, returned to his original containment cell. Several weeks later, SCP-213 breached containment again. However, this time, it was completely unintentional. Security camera footage from 3:15 a.m. on the day in question showed 213's bed and a portion of the floor vaporized in a flash of light, after which he fell through the opening in the floor and landed in the basement. This incident made it clear that 213 had far less control over his ability than previously believed. Rather than a purposely destructive entity, he was simply a kid who destroyed what he touched and could not do anything about it. If it could happen accidentally this time, when else could it happen? Could he potentially someday vaporize himself without meaning to? Following this containment breach, and some time to recuperate from the injuries he sustained from his fall, 213 offered to be more cooperative with the research into his condition. He agreed to comply with a series of experiments as well as routine physical examinations, and whatever else it might take to unlock the secrets of the vaporization effect. Just like the Foundation, he wanted to know why he caused this destruction and how he could stop it from happening. During one of the agreed-upon physical examinations, the research team discovered something concerning. There were smooth nodules, growths of abnormal tissue on 213's back placed in the shape of a perfect square, with exactly 15 centimeters between each one. The nodules were determined not to be tumors or cancerous in any way. They did not seem to cause the subject any pain, and he could not remember how long they had been there. Perhaps they had been there his entire life. Nothing resembling the nodules or their precise placement could be found in any public medical records or research journals. It became clear that the strange spots on 213's back were likely somehow related to his anomalous ability. Medical personnel were assigned to monitor 213 in his containment and watch for any changes, and follow-up examinations were scheduled to keep an eye on the nodules and any other potential physical symptoms. A week after the discovery of the first 4 nodules, 213 was brought back into the examination room for a follow-up inspection. There was nothing new found on the subject's back, the original nodules remaining in their place and exhibiting no change in size or shape. However, upon inspection of his hands, the research team discovered 2 more nodules. When asked if he was experiencing any pain or discomfort as a result of these nodules, 213 insisted that he only felt some mild itching and irritation on the skin around them. A doctor pressed gently on one of the nodules with his fingertips, and it did not budge. With the appearance of these additional lumps on 213's hands, the research team opted to perform a biopsy on one of them and extract a sample. A local anesthetic was administered to 213's left hand, and the doctor attempted to slice into the surface of the nodule with a scalpel. As soon as the scalpel's blade came into contact with his skin, there was a sizzling sound, a blinding flash, and when the attending researchers had regained clear vision of the room, the scalpel had disappeared. SCP-213 insisted that he had not deliberately vaporized the scalpel and offered to try again. The second scalpel met the same fate as the first, as did the third and then a 4th scalpel. After the 5th scalpel disappeared, the testing was suspended for the day, and 213 was sent back to his containment chamber to rest for the next day's testing. From that day on, 213's demeanor changed. He was less enthusiastic about continuing to research his condition, complaining of a pervasive sense of exhaustion no matter how much he slept, ate, or hydrated. He complained of extreme pain in his back and stomach, which did not respond to treatment with physical therapy or painkillers. In spite of 213's newfound apathy, the research team was determined to persist. They had come this far in their quest to uncover the mysteries of SCP-213, and they were not about to let their subjects' discomfort and a few lost scalpels stop them now. The plan for another follow-up exam and a new attempt to perform a biopsy were cut short when 213 was spotted via security camera having a seizure in his containment cell. He was moved to intensive care and kept there for further observation. Over the course of the previous 48 hours, 10 more nodules had appeared on his back, each separated by a distance of 5 centimeters. The nodules formed no discernible pattern. Once stabilized, 213 was returned to his cell, where more medical personnel were stationed alongside the guards in order to monitor his condition and watch for any further seizures or other adverse effects. 1 week later, everything would change, and the true nature of SCP-213 would finally be revealed. 213 requested his next physical exam, claiming that he had noticed something wrong with him while taking a shower. While washing his back, he was shocked to find the skin suddenly smoothed and unblemished. The nodules had disappeared, seemingly overnight. However, he was more concerned than relieved. He could not shake the feeling that, even though he could not see it, something worse had replaced them. A cursory examination could not identify anything in place of the nodules. However, a closer inspection revealed that there was indeed something there. Where there had once been lumps of tissue, there were now thin cuts, like surgical incisions less than 1 millimeter in width. Guards rushed to the examination room where the sound of a terrified scream echoed through the halls. They found the medical examiner white as a sheet and trembling. While she had been examining the incisions on 213's skin, the one on his left palm had opened to reveal an eye. Though she could not explain how, she knew that the eye was watching her, that it could see what she was doing and wanted to understand it. 213 was permanently transferred to a medical wing of the facility and placed under constant observation. The appearance of this eye sparked a new hypothesis among the research team. SCP-213's anomalous properties are not his own. Indeed, his body is not his own either. Some sort of parasite is residing within him, watching his surroundings through eyes buried beneath the skin. It is vaporizing matter in an attempt to protect itself from harm, and possibly as a means of feeding itself. When the eye first appeared and the parasite hypothesis was introduced, SCP-213 began to panic. He begged the research team to remove the parasite from his body, to cut him open and extract it by any means necessary. They refused, and 213 had to be sedated in order to keep him from attacking any of the medical staff. Whatever is living inside of 213, it does not show up on medical scans. It cannot or will not communicate with the research team about its nature or what it might want. The more the medical team tests on it, the larger it seems to grow, with more and more tiny incisions appearing on 213's body, through which the entity can look. SCP-213 had been placed in a medically induced coma until the parasitic entity can be better understood and perhaps even removed from his body. In the meantime, perhaps it is better for him and every living thing around him if he just stays asleep.
It has long been the mission of the SCP Foundation to secure and contain any anomalies they encounter, all to protect the safety of the human race. Sometimes containing an SCP is a trivial task, as simple as guarding a room or keeping an eye on an artifact with strange but mostly harmless properties. Other times, though, anomalies require a considerable number of the Foundation's personnel and resources to keep them under control. This latter category commonly includes some of the most dangerous creatures and entities that the SCP Foundation keeps under lock and key. However, while it might be only in very rare cases, every so often an SCP comes along with its very own built-in method of containment. This can often be the result of someone encountering an anomaly and discovering the perfect way of imprisoning it before the SCP Foundation comes along and steals all the credit. Undoubtedly, this makes the job of securing an anomaly all the easier for the Foundation's staff. After all, someone else has already done the hard part of the job for them. Or rather, it would make things easier if only the Foundation's own researchers chose not to interfere and could leave a deadly threat kept safely in its box without trying to find out what makes it tick. SCP-5001 is, in some ways, a reminder that some things are best left alone, but it is also a grave warning not to tamper with that which you do not understand. Both of these lessons would soon be imparted on the SCP Foundation. Buried 60 kilometers below the ground in northern Russia is SCP-5001, a 53-kilometer wide structure. It is an enormous biomechanical machine, but to the untrained eye there is nothing anomalous about the object. And according to the Foundation's findings, this is indeed the case. There is nothing inherently anomalous about the structure itself. But there are a number of characteristics that seem to suggest it is, in some way, connected to anomalous phenomena. For one, there's the sheer scale of the structure, and then there's the records that were uncovered about SCP-5001, which appear to have been monitoring and tracking its status. Perhaps whoever constructed it or discovered it kept a record as they observed the structure. Nothing too out of the ordinary about that. But what's strange is that these date back to 11,000 BC. And yet were somehow made with modern systems of measurement. And other weirder documents have been recovered from inside of SCP-5001. Records written in languages from all over the world, and even some in languages lost to time. Among them are papers in Phoenician, Ancient Hebrew, both Ancient and Modern Greek, Latin, Anglo-Saxon, along with Modern Russian, English, and Mandarin. Some of these documents are even written in languages that the SCP Foundation's top researchers are yet to properly identify. The explanation for all this would seem obvious, wouldn't it? Writing in both ancient and contemporary languages, records that date all the way back to the last of the prehistoric era, it all seems to point in a certain direction. Somehow, SCP-5001 has a link to time travel. Perhaps it was even a hub for a group of time travelers, right? Wrong. The Foundation already thought that this might be the case and checked for any signs of temporal anomalies. And yet, they found nothing. No evidence to suggest that there had ever been any time travel near or using SCP-5001. There were no devices on site that could affect time, and no traces of any residue or fallout from a temporal occurrence. So what exactly does this thing even do? Well, we're afraid to say the Foundation researchers have been stumped on the answer to that question too, and they are not the only ones either. Way back in the 50s, the GRU's Division P also had an interest in SCP-5001. For anyone who isn't already acquainted with them, they are one of the SCP Foundation's numerous groups of interest, a list of organizations, corporations, and agencies from around the world who have also had dealings with anomalies. In the case of GRU-P, they were originally a division of the Russian Army during the Cold War. The specialty of GRU Division P was the acquisition of anomalous objects and entities. In other words, they were the Soviet Union's very own SCP Foundation. In 1953, GRU Division P was alerted to abnormal seismic activity in a narrow region of northern Russia. A team was immediately sent in to investigate and began attempting to take seismic measurements of the area in question. During their various experiments and tests, GRU Division P realized a discrepancy in their readings. Again and again, they checked and double-checked their results, only to discover that this reading wasn't the result of faulty equipment or even human error. There was something big nearby. What they hadn't yet realized was around 30 kilometers away, deep underground, was SCP-5001. Immediately, GRU Division P began drilling towards the location of SCP-5001, but for years found that they were unable to breach the exterior of the structure. Defeated, the project was abandoned in 1955. However, Soviet leader First Secretary Khrushchev seemed to have a vested interest in gaining access to SCP-5001. As a result, he privately funded the GRU Division P operation, allowing them to continue their work in secret for a number of years, from 1959 until Khrushchev was disposed in 1964. Of course, this was all during the height of the Cold War, but by the late 1960s, international relations between the Soviet Union and the United States of America were starting to ease. Thanks to the relaxing tensions, a contract was introduced allowing the two nations' secret organizations to work together on a number of operations involving potentially dangerous anomalies. This meant that the SCP Foundation was finally able to step in and contribute to the GRU Division P's project concerning SCP-5001. Their first task? Actually getting inside the subterranean structure. Naturally, given how well-versed the Foundation is in dealing with anomalies, they had ideas for how to crack this nut. By acquiring anomalous technology from the Global Occult Coalition, another group of interest, as well as experimental designs created by one Dr. Elijah Rachma, the SCP Foundation were finally able to breach the structure in 1971. From then until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the SCP Foundation and GRU Division P worked together to conduct a number of studies into the origin and purpose of SCP-5001. Both organizations were curious as to the technology the structure possessed, and attempts were even made to recreate some of the devices found within. Among this advanced technology were ontological stabilizers, also known as Scranton reality anchors, which are located around SCP-5001's inner chamber. These were designed to directly alter the amount of Humes in a given area. What's a Hume? Well, to keep it simple, a Hume is a measure of the reality around us. If it helps, imagine reality as a pile of sand. Now imagine that you remove a single grain of sand from the pile. Congratulations, you just removed one Hume from this reality. Taking one away doesn't really do much, but start grabbing handfuls and the pile gets smaller, scattered. Less a pile and more a light dusting of sand. Reality works the same way. Take too much away and it starts to lose whatever it was before. Being able to alter the amount of Humes in an area meant that these ontological stabilizers could alter the strength of reality itself, even nullify the reality-bending properties of some anomalies. In theory, an SCP with the power to influence reality could be contained using this technology. The effects of their abilities reduced significantly, although not negated entirely. Another noteworthy piece of technology uncovered was codenamed Omega. Omega was discovered in an unmarked room on a computer terminal that was connected to every area of SCP-5001 by dozens of cables. The software itself was an artificial intelligence construct, a computerized consciousness that seemed to serve the purpose of controlling the various systems within SCP-5001. The Omega seemed to work by providing an answer whenever someone used a keyboard to input a question. The artificial intelligence of Omega appeared able to hold a conversation, but would refuse to give any insight into when the SCP-5001 structure was built or what its purpose was. Despite neither group knowing what SCP-5001's function was, an agreement between the SCP Foundation and GRU Division P was formed. Both organizations shared the belief that Omega, the ontological stabilizers, as well as the other anomalous technologies could never, under any circumstances, be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. They had a pact to keep the knowledge of SCP-5001 and these devices strictly between themselves. However, this agreement was, sadly, not to last. In the early 90s, GRU Division P liquidated its assets and disbanded. A number of the Russian division's highest-ranking officers stole the anomalous technology that the organization had in its possession, which they then sold to Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited. MC&D Ltd are yet another of the SCP Foundation's groups of interest. According to Foundation intelligence, Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited is a London-based club that has caused numerous problems for the Foundation over the years. They have ties to wealthy figures across the globe and cater to the super-rich clientele by providing them with the most exclusive, expensive, and rare experiences available. How do they do this? By gathering the anomalous items and auctioning them off to the highest bidders. A number of GRU Division P operatives also joined up with the Chaos Insurgency. This is a group of interest that consists of personnel who previously worked for the Foundation, but have since broken away to pursue their own rogue agenda. Much like a number of other groups of interest, the insurgency uses anomalies and SCPs for their own benefit, as well as dabbling in a bit of arms dealing and the selling of highly classified intelligence. Hey, it's good to have a diverse portfolio. Despite former members of GRU Division P seeking alternative employment with some less than reputable groups, the SCP Foundation still managed to keep the existence and location of SCP-5001 a closely guarded secret. However, even with the structure fully under their control, their leading researchers were still baffled as to what exactly the purpose of the underground structure was, or rather, that was the case. On December 30th, 2019, an explosion erupted in the northeast sector of SCP-5001. The cause of the explosion was unknown, but the damage caused a tremendous and almost catastrophic loss of power. Whether the explosion had been triggered by one of the many groups of interest, like the former GRU Division P, or just a machinery malfunction, it almost caused the total destruction of SCP-5001. What would be so bad about that? Well, remember earlier when we said that every so often an SCP comes along with its very own built-in method of containment? You see, it wasn't the structure or technology of SCP-5001 that the Foundation should have been worried about. It was the thing inside of SCP-5001. Just as some Foundation researchers had long theorized, SCP-5001 was a cage, a containment unit for its own anomalous objects within, something powerful enough to alter reality right down to the Humes, hence the need for ontological stabilizers to dampen its power, and Omega to keep the place running. This entity, known either as SCP-5001-A or the Devourer, was being held inside SCP-5001, and when the structure was damaged, it was almost freed. While there was no data on SCP-5001's computer system about this being's appearance or the extent of its anomalous powers, whoever created SCP-5001 went to considerable effort to keep the Devourer contained, viewing it as a threat to all of reality. And all that effort was almost undone when the structure was damaged by the explosion. Fortunately, the SCP Foundation was able to re-establish containment of SCP-5001-A, though at the cost of a tremendous amount of lives. When personnel were finally permitted to re-enter SCP-5001, a number of the structure's core systems had been damaged, but it was still able to perform its primary function and keep the Devourer safely contained within. As personnel entered the structure, a message appeared through the Omega computer system that read, "Hello, my children. Although you have grown immensely since your earliest days, you have much room to grow. Your species' intellect is merely a bud with so much potential. Your weapons are powerful. Your medicine is supreme. Your engineering is beautiful. With proper guidance and care, you are sure to reach an elevated state of being and transcend your bodies for something more whole and perfect. That is why it pains me so dearly to request that you leave this place immediately. Your studying and probing have almost resulted in the end of all I have worked towards to keep you alive. If you comply, I guarantee that the Devourer will never escape, and your species will be free to pursue the enlightenment of technology for all eternity. Let this be my final gift to you, directly from the center of my broken heart."
Okay, back up. Broken heart. Interesting. Where have we heard something like that before? We'd hate to jump to any conclusions, but when one hears about a being of great power related to large and mysterious machines, and that word again, broken,
all the groups of interest that seem to be tied into SCP-5001, and we neglected to mention perhaps the most important of all, the Church of the Broken God. This religious organization that reveres industry and technology over the impurity of flesh has been united in a singular purpose, rebuilding their deity, the broken god Mechane, whose body was split apart in an attempt to preserve the future of mankind. Perhaps the heart of this great and ancient machine, this devourer, is actually the heart of something else entirely. Though of course, there's only so much we can speculate. Knowledge, after all, can sometimes be like a flame. It can light your way, but if you get too close, you will inevitably be burned. If ever you're in doubt, ask the people devoured and assimilated by the heart of Mechane the last time it was freed by the Church. If ever the heart gets out again, you'll certainly be with them. The SCP Foundation has come so far. Their technology, their knowledge, their vast resources all allow them to contain some of the most powerful forces mankind has ever seen, and even some we haven't. But as SCP-5001 shows, there is still much that even the brightest researchers at the Foundation don't yet understand, and their drive to poke and prod at the unknown nearly led to the end of reality as we know it. Perhaps one day we'll be able to fully understand just what the Devourer is, and the ways that SCP-5001 worked to protect us from it, but we're not there yet, and there's no guarantee that we ever will be. While the pursuit of knowledge is always an admirable one, when it comes to SCP-5001, maybe the Foundation should have left well enough alone.
There's a monster under my bed. Almost every parent has heard their kids make the claim, and it's usually nothing more than some unusual shadows, or at worst a household pest scurrying around. Parents usually tell their child to go back to sleep, or maybe try to dispel their fears by shining a light under the bed. It's a childhood rite of passage, and one that usually passes soon enough. But for one young woman in Missouri, the monster under her bed was very real and very dangerous. SCP-3887-A doesn't seem like she belongs in a containment facility. She's a 24-year-old woman who lived a quiet life in her hometown until things went horribly wrong. She doesn't appear to possess any special abilities, and the Foundation is able to contain her without any difficulty. But wherever she goes, death and destruction follow. It's not her doing, but there is something out there that will not stand to see her hurt in any way. Her personal monster under the bed is very protective, something another young woman found out the hard way. Incident 3887-A-1 occurred in 2014, when the young woman was attending a party with her girlfriend. Her partner was berating and humiliating her in front of the guests, which was apparently not a rare occurrence in their relationship. Suddenly, something manifested under a nearby table, and before she could react, her girlfriend was brutally mauled by the unknown creature. Her limbs were completely severed from her body, and she died at the scene. An undercover SCP agent who was implanted within the local authorities made their way to the scene as soon as possible and found SCP-3887-A in a state of shock. And who could blame her after the encounter she just had with what would become to be known as SCP-3887-B. While 3887-A is a normal human with no unusual abilities or characteristics, 3887-B is anything but. Foundation scientists have described it as a humanoid entity standing over 7 feet tall. Its skin is greenish-gray, and it has 2 long, sharp horns on its head. Its head and neck are covered in thick black hair, and its eyes are a striking yellow color. Its mouth is full of sharp fangs similar to that of a shark, and its elongated arms allow it to move on all 4s. It has a long, hairless tail that resembles a rat's, and possesses both male and female reproductive organs. No one knows where it came from, but they do have an idea why it's sticking around. SCP-3887-B seems to be bonded to SCP-3887-A and can appear in any darkened area within a 5-meter radius around her. While its favorite location is under 3887-A's bed, which has since been brought to the facility, it appears to be able to teleport wherever she is.
just as it did during the party where it made its presence brutally clear. It has odd eating patterns and is able to gain nourishment from practically any object, whether it resembles what we would consider food or not. Its favorite treats, for example, SCP-3887-A's socks. But it does have one weakness that has been useful in containing it. It can't stand the light. And it doesn't just hate it. When SCP-3887-B is exposed to bright light, it develops blisters and wounds and flees to the nearest dark area. SCP Foundation scientists are at a loss to explain exactly what this creature is, though. And SCP-3887-B seems to be a chimera of multiple animals with multiple types of DNA. It possesses DNA similar to humans, but also from a type of oryx with similar horns, as well as a rat with the same type of tail, as well as a common cane toad. And there's even some DNA that doesn't resemble any creature in nature. Studying it further has been trickier though, because it seems to have the effect of disrupting any electronic recording devices near it, causing lasting damage if it's in proximity to them for too long. There has been one good bit of news for SCP scientists though, because while it has shown that it can be extremely violent, it has not attacked Foundation officials, not yet at least. Its good behavior may not have anything to do with how it personally feels about Foundation staff though, and is instead all thanks to SCP-3887-A. 3887-A has been completely cooperative since she was taken into custody by the Foundation. She doesn't perceive them as a threat, and so far it seems like SCP-3887-B is following her lead. It has a strong emotional connection to the young woman, and when they're alone, they show affectionate behavior towards each other. While the creature does not seem to like the Foundation, it doesn't seem like it wants to become hostile, until the Foundation gives it a reason to. When 3887-A was interviewed following the tragic incident by undercover Foundation agent Bellamy, she was panicked and terrified. She admitted that her partner often treated her badly and believed that the creature was trying to protect her. She admitted that she had seen the creature before. She even had a name for it. She called her Grenda. 3887-A thought she was crazy. Now there was proof though. She was not imagining the monster under her bed. Describing Grenda as her boogeyman, the young woman talked about how she had known the creature since she was a child. She grew up in an old house in the country that was full of strange sounds that made it sound like something was in her room with her. And sometimes she would even catch a glimpse of what she thought was a monster under her bed watching her. She tried telling her parents, but they thought she was making the whole thing up. And even she was forced to wonder if she was hallucinating or had somehow imagined the whole thing. But then when she was a teenager, all of her doubts were put to bed. One night, 3887-A's parents were loudly fighting, a sadly not rare occurrence in their household, and she locked herself in her room to get away from them. As she hid, Grenda emerged from under her bed for the first time and talked with her. And she isn't the only one that Grenda is willing to speak with. She's also sat down for her own interviews with Foundation researchers. Well, the researchers sat down, while Grenda remained under the bed. Foundation researcher Dr. Tanner interviewed Grenda, who was cordial but guarded, and remained deeply protective of the girl under her protection. She expressed feeling guilty for getting 3887-A in trouble, but Dr. Tanner assured her that 3887-A was not being punished and was being kept at the Foundation for her own safety. He offered that they could keep Grenda safe as well, but she responded that as long as 3887-A remained safe, then she would be as well. She explained that her kind fed on the anxiety of children, which was why they lurked under their beds. She was apparently only supposed to remain with this girl until she was 10 or so, but became attached and decided to stay with her, which was against the rules of her people, and as a result she had been exiled from her home. At this point, Grenda offered to show herself to the researcher and began to emerge from under the bed. Unfortunately, as has become standard when attempting to document SCP-3887-B, all of the recording equipment malfunctioned, and was unable to record Grenda's appearance. The Foundation continued to have questions about this pair and their strange relationship, and interviewed SCP-3887-A again, this time by a Dr. Garden. 3887-A told Dr. Garden that she had been sleeping well and had been spending lots of time talking to the entity under her bed. That led Dr. Garden to bring up a theory about how SCP-3887-B had come to exist. The young woman speculated that Grenda may have been created from her fears. One of her first memories of being scared was when she went to an aquarium and a massive bull shark came close to the glass where it bared its rows and rows of shark teeth, the exact same kind of teeth that Grenda possessed. In fact, all of the traits Grenda exhibited, like her rat tail, seemed to connect to childhood fears that she had experienced. 3887-A always felt alone as a little girl, and she believed that she might have manifested Grenda as a companion who was there exactly when she needed her to be. This raised the question of whether SCP-3887-B really was the unnatural entity, or if SCP-3887-A is the source of the entity's existence. The next interview with SCP-3887-B would raise even more questions. When Dr. Garden went to interview SCP-3887-B, it was clear that the entity was agitated. Grenda became hostile as soon as Dr. Garden entered the room, saying she was hungry and didn't want to answer questions. When Dr. Garden said that 3887-A had provided it with socks, the entity reacted with anger. The socks were just a snack. To live, it needed fear. 3887-B fed off human emotions, specifically paranoia and anxiety. SCP-3887-A used to be full of them, but now she was unusually calm in the facility, and it was having a bad effect on her companion. When Dr. Garden promised to talk to supervisors, the creature became more agitated and reached out from under the bed, grabbing Dr. Garden and pulling her under the bed. No one knew what would happen to Dr. Garden under the bed, and SCP-3887-A was quickly summoned to try to calm her companion down. But when she called for Grenda, there was no response. It was feared that Dr. Garden had been lost to the area under the bed that no one can access. But then 13 minutes later, the doctor suddenly emerged from under the bed. She was bruised, soaking wet, and missing articles including shoes, socks, and her glasses. Later interviews with Dr. Garden would give the best picture yet of where SCP-3887-B comes from. Dr. Garden described being pulled under the bed, which then led somewhere else entirely. She fell for 15 seconds, still being held by SCP-3887-B. But when she landed, she was alone in a large cave made of black rock with purple gems in the walls. The cave contained a waterfall, a lake, and what looked like SCP-3887's secret home. It was filled with pictures of the girl she was bonded to, a violin, some stuffed animals, and large piles of the girl's socks. SCP-3887-B was there in the cave with her too, watching her. She would catch glimpses of the creature, her white fangs and her yellow eyes. She was terrified and ran screaming, trying to find any way out of there as the creature pursued her. She couldn't evade her forever though, and eventually Grenda grabbed Dr. Garden. She was lifted into the air as Grenda bared her shark-like teeth, but instead of eating her, the creature instead took off the doctor's socks and thanked her, before somehow sending her back up into the darkness. She then found herself back under the bed, surrounded by worried SCP personnel. Since then, SCP-3887-B has not brought anyone else into its home. It seems feeding on Dr. Garden's fear was enough for the time being, and the situation has remained stable since. The SCP Foundation has been able to develop relatively simple containment procedures for the two entities that make up SCP-3887, as neither is currently hostile. The two are contained within a standard humanoid containment cell with the bed at the center. SCP-3887-A is given standard amenities, a healthy diet including a vitamin for some minor health issues, and her own control over the lights in the cell. She has requested and been given a gaming system for entertainment and up-to-date entertainment media, but was denied access to the internet, a pet cat, and access to the on-site recreation areas. due to the risk of SCP-3887-B getting loose. The facility does have plans in place in case Grenda decides to become hostile again though. While SCP-3887-A normally maintains control of the lights in her cell, the Foundation has a failsafe installed so they can turn them up at any time. Since SCP-3887-B reacts negatively to bright light, the lights can be used as a security system to send her retreating back under the bed until she can be pacified through other measures. While neither of the SCP-3887 entities appears to be seeking to escape, it is impossible to predict where and how 3887-B would act if 3887-A was free from her cell again, and whether she would attempt to harm those she perceives as a threat to 3887-A as she did in the past. So for now, the Foundation is focused on keeping both of them pacified, which in the case of 3887-B means a healthy supply of socks. But there's one other lingering question the Foundation hasn't solved. SCP-3887-B referenced being exiled from its kin for breaking the rules and was confined to a cave. That means there might be others like Grenda out there, and they may be more aggressive and less scrupulous than she is. While no other specimens have been found, the SCP Foundation will be keeping a careful eye on any reports of monsters lurking under children's beds. They might just be telling the truth. Now for another entity that lurks in a seemingly bottomless pit. Check out SCP-354, the Red Pool, or watch this video instead.